Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, spirits of all ages, welcome to the BlunderSpeaker Show. Yes, indeed, folks. Welcome back. It is the season 1 finale of the BlunderSpeaker Show. Absolute pleasure to have you here. My name is Tepid Goose, as always. This is the show where we, as I always say, we talk about Spirit Island, we play Spirit Island, we wave goodbye to Spirit Island sometimes, because sometimes it reaches the end of a season, and that is what we are here for today. Of course, everything gets done here in one take. That is the name of the game, if you're unfamiliar and joining us for the first time. For everybody else, welcome back. I sincerely hope all of you are hitting the like and subscribe and all that kind of good stuff down in the well, I was about to say down in the chat. Please do get involved in the chat as well. I've fumbled again. I fumbled it again. That's the intro. But anyway, that's what happens here. As I say, it's done in one take. My name, Tepagoose. I gave you that already. What date are we and what day are we today? Today we are Tuesday, I still believe it is. Yes, Tuesday, 3rd of June. It is now 21:46. That is almost 9:45 p.m. in the evening. A little bit late getting started, but unfortunately that's the way it always seems to go. But I'm really looking forward to this. We are, of course, here to talk about the Tsardom of Russia. I believe I called it Kingdom of Russia last time out, but it is, of course, the Tsardom of Russia. It is the 8th installment as part of the Adversary Series, and what a way to be closing this season 1 out than with the biggest and the baddest and the most difficult of all, Russia. Look, it's been a long road. I think we're about 23, 24 episodes, something like that at this stage. So around about 6 months, I think, since I started this. So it's been a long road. But look, we'll get into all that sort of reminiscing and sort of blubbering and personal stuff all later on, and we'll talk all about that. But we do, of course, have a show to get through this evening. You know me. I have to sort of stop and I have to talk about things and me and life and all that sort of stuff before we get started. And of course the beer. So we are going to have a very special beer this evening. And I feel like I've been saying that quite a bit recently. Maybe been treating myself just a little bit too much. I forgot my towel. I'm supposed to have a towel with me here, which is not going to be great news for taking this thing out of the ice bath. But there it is. It's Rye River. It's the Rye River, the local brewery down the way. I've had them on the channel before. They had a 10-year celebration beer that came out towards the end of last year. It is called the Brunch Baltic Breakfast Porter. You can see it there. I'll show it up to the camera for those watching on the video. It is a 12.5%er, and we've got a big old bottle here, a big old boy. It's a wine bottle, 750 mils, and it is the alcohol volume of wine as well, ABV of a light wine. So essentially drinking a bottle of wine for tonight's episode. So we shall see how that all goes. But this was a beer I've had my eye on for quite a while down in the local shop there. I spied this one, and I like a fancy beer, as I've probably mentioned on the channel before, but this lad here cost me €20, so it's not often I'll spend €20 on a beer, let me tell you. But I figured for tonight, given that it's a bit of a special episode and all the rest of it, I would pick one up and see what all the fuss is about, let's say. So I wish I had gotten my towel to be able to dry this thing off, because it's all a bit wet and slippy. But give us a second here. Let me pop the cork. It's a beer with a cork for those of you that aren't looking on the screen. So we'll see if we can get a bit of a popping sound in there. It'll probably ruin the mic. But anyway, go on. Let's see. Go on now. Come on. There we go. Alrighty. 12.5%. As I say, I have my special stout and porter glass. That's how much of a nerd and how fancy I am, and how much of a snob is probably the better word for a beer snob. So we get a big old glass of that going for now, and we'll have a try of that and see what the fuss is all about with the celebratory Baltic breakfast porter. It smells like dark chocolate, very much so. Let's have a taste. Oh, that's a big boy, all right. A full bottle of this one is going to get me going. 12.5%. My goodness. I hope my wife isn't listening. She'd kill me if she knew I spent €20 on a bottle of beer. I seem to talk about her all in a terrible light all the time, don't I? It's always talking about how my wife would kill me. She is actually a very nice person, believe it or not. But yeah, she wouldn't take too kindly on me spending that kind of money on a bottle of drink. But anyway, that is sort of neither here nor there. That's the beer. We've got the water over there, still off the sparkling water. I'm happy to announce, and I do believe it did some favors for me on the old health front there as well. So unfortunately, I was kind of hoping it didn't, so I could go back to drinking it. But it'll save me money. I was drinking far too much of that stuff, as I say. And plastic, sort of recyclable plastic as it is, again, not great for the environment. So multiple reasons to be giving that stuff up. So that is all of that. Now, speaking of giving stuff up, you may forgive me, hopefully, a minute or two here of your time for a little small sales pitch, shall we call it. Call it support for the channel. I don't know how we want to call it, but you can spy over my shoulder. You've probably seen it in the past before. I've got a box here called of a game called Dawn of the Zeds. A rare game, quite highly sought after, out of print for a number of years at this stage. I bought this game. I'll cut a very long story short to say I bought this game as a rotation option, given that I play Spirit Island pretty much the whole time. I wanted a game that I could get to the table here and there. Bought this one. Comes very highly rated, and I played it exactly one time. The game is excellent. It's pretty much exactly what I expected it would be, but it's a bit heavier and a bit more complex than let's say than I need for a game that I'm going to take out here and there, big rule books, that kind of thing. So an excellent game, but I just can't justify, given that I mentioned before, the old struggles for cash and all that. I can't justify having something like that I paid, over €200 for sitting on my shelf being used at a very odd time. So I'm looking to offload that one, and I wanted to use my channel to give you guys an opportunity. Perhaps you've had it in your mind that that's a game you may want to buy, or maybe now that I've said it, you have it in your mind as a game you want to buy. Call it support for the channel if you like. I'd be happy to call it that if you would. But look, I spent €210 or something like that to assemble this. Now, it's not just the game. I should point out I have 3 unopened expansion packs. These are very hard to find. I have them. I have the tarot sleeves for the character panels, and I have 2 packets of unopened Dragon Shield clear matte sleeves to sleeve the whole game. I literally bought it all. I've said it before, 0 to 100 and all of that. I went 0 to 100 and I bought everything. And before all the sleeves and the expansions and all that arrived, I opened it, played it once, and I kind of realized then after a couple of months of not having gotten it back to the table that it's not going to be for me. So anyway, I'm not going to waffle any longer. That game is for sale. If you fancy picking yourself up a fantastic game, a highly sought after, as I say, and very difficult to find game, probably the only person in the world who's selling that entire package of things right over there on my shoulder, and it is in better than pristine condition. It is like brand new. So as I say, you can have that. I'm going to round it down. I'm just going to call it 200. I'm trying to break as much even as I can here. 200, and then plus whatever shipping is going to be in the world. So I'm sorry for all that sales pitch. I hate to start my podcast with that, but I did figure that's going on and trying to list it on BoardGame Geek and all that kind of stuff. I have a slide platform. Some people listen to it, and some people hear it and might be interested in board games and may well, as I say, be interested in picking that one up. So if it's something you're interested in, please do drop me a list, or not a list, drop me a note, drop me a DM, drop me anything you'd like. You know where I am. I'm on all the platforms. You've probably seen me posting by now. So do get in touch and let me know. And it's first come, first serve. So, don't hang about if that's something you might be interested in. Anyway, that is all of that. What are we actually here to talk about for this evening? Well, as I say, it's Russia, okay? So I'm going to follow the kind of structure which I've landed on up until now. Quite happy with it, how it landed, and quite happy to kind of, it was probably more the second half of the block of 8 that we sort of really kind of refined the approach, let's say. But very happy with it, how we landed on it. So it's we'll start out with the adversary panel, and that's going to be the whole, who are they, what do they do, essentially. Then we're going to go from there. We're going to go into the community inputs. Again, as always, huge amount of inputs involved in this show. People were really, really, keen to get involved and add their opinions as they always were. So we'll get into all of that. Then we're going to go to sort of my breakdown and analysis, where I will use again the standard sort of template of how do they beat us, and then how do we go about beating them. Now, as I've done on pretty much all my episodes, I've picked a theme and I've done a little bit of a spotlight on something in the game. And tonight, it's going to be on the fear deck. So, of course, fear is a kind of a mechanic that Russia lean into a fair bit, which we will hear about. So I've decided to do a little bit of a deep dive on the fear deck itself. So we'll make that part of that kind of how to beat them section, and we'll go through a little bit about what does the fear deck look like, some categories of cards that are in there. We won't spend too long on it, but I just figured it would be nice to kind of look and hear a couple of little sort of bits of data and a couple of little stats around kind of how the deck works that you wouldn't really stop and do and think about. And I never really had done the same thing up until now, so it was actually quite insightful for me to do that. So we'll look at that later on, and we will of course have plenty of tips and tricks on how to actually go about beating Russia. Then I will close out after that with a small bit, as usual, on my playthrough that I did. So I, of course, have done a playthrough. And I think what I did last time out, I'll do again here. I'll actually recommend you probably go and watch that playthrough now. It's going to be up here, isn't it, in this corner. Go and click on that and go and watch the playthrough. It was a humdinger of a brain burner, a barnstormer. Over 5 hours, and do not let that discourage you, because it was a very interesting and strategic game, as it tends to be with Russia. You really need to be aware of everything that's going on the board. So there's a lot of thinking, a lot of talking, a lot of breaking it down, and I hope that was enjoyable. But if you haven't seen it, do go and watch it, because of course we'll be talking about that later on, and I don't want to spoil it if you intend on seeing that playthrough. Now, that's going to be that, and then of course I'll close out with a small little bit later on around kind of what comes next for the channel and all those kind of things. So let me stop there. Oh boy, yeah, that's a beer. That's a full beer. Breakfast porter, by the way, for anybody interested. It's not really a porter that's designed to be drank at breakfast time. I'm going to just be honest with you. Now, once upon a time, the old me might have thought 12.5% beer, that's perfect for breakfast. I'm not quite there. I'm not at that stage in life anymore. I'm thankful to stay. But it's nothing actually to do with the time of the day, necessarily, that it's supposed to be drank at. Generally, this idea of breakfast stout, breakfast porter, came about with when sort of brewers and breweries would use certain ingredients and hops or whatever to sort of reflect some flavors, maybe smoky flavors for bacon. Maybe they might use, for example, oats or something like that in the boil of the beer to add a kind of a body to the beer. Coffee is used a lot in those kind of breakfast things, so coffee and breakfast are obviously linked there. So it's very much about the flavor profiles and some of the ingredients that are used there. Maple syrup is one that's used in here as well. So maple syrup is, I think this one is actually done in maple syrup barrels as well as whiskey barrels. So it is an aged, barrel-aged beer, and the flavour is very much reflecting that. This is a very strong beer. And Baltic porter then is kind of a it's much like Imperial Stout from the UK. I think Imperial Stout originates from Baltic, obviously Baltic region, all that kind of stuff. But it's brewed in a different way. I think it uses lager yeast or something like that instead of ale. But that's the general gist around all of that, if you're interested. But like I said, 12.5% is a very full, very strong beer. This is a sipper, and I have a full bottle of wine worth of a sipper of a beer. So we don't know where we're going to get to. I'll be honest with you. This might get emotional. This might it's got to get something anyway. It's going to get a little crazy because you don't really leave beer for a few days, do you, after you open it? So probably going to have to try get through this evening, and celebrate, as I say, the end of season 1. But anyway, we'll have another bit of that. Get the rest of that chilling in the ice bath. and we'll get stuck in. We're now what are we, 15 minutes in before we look at the adversary panel. This probably won't be a short one tonight, folks, as it probably wasn't, or as it definitely wasn't last time out for England, and as the playthrough for Russia certainly wasn't. Probably not talking about a short episode tonight here, but look, that's kind of just the way it's gone, and I've enjoyed myself all the way through, so there's no sense in rushing it at the last stage. Excuse the pun. Now, I think we need plenty of water to go with that beer this evening, that's for sure. Okay, the Tsardom of Russia. Shall I suppose I'll stop here, and I'll give a very brief summarization of my own thoughts on the adversary before we get into what they do or anything like that. Last time out, England were my favourite adversary in the game. This time out, Russia are my least favourite adversary in the game. And that is not really a huge damning sort of indictment on them, because I love all 8 adversaries. I think they're all fantastic. I think they're designed brilliantly well. I think the range of experience you get from the adversaries in this game is sublime. And Russia are no different. There's one particular reason that I don't really like these, which I will get into when we kind of go through it, and that's kind of really it. I think they're a brilliant, nasty puzzle to solve. I find them extremely difficult. I talked about in the playthrough last time at the start. I said if I was going to lose any game, it was always going to be Russia. And you know, they just present such a challenge. And I did reflect on things as I kind of came out of the back end of this Adversary series, and in my opinion, these are a full, probably, when I use again my relative scoring, I think I'd actually rate these at a, you know, relative to the rest, I would call these like an 11.25. I'd actually have them higher than 11, whereas before I had England lower than 11. I think they're a full half a point different, or sorry, more difficult than England. That's how nasty I think these guys are. I think they're really, really tough. But look, that was just to give you the kind of gist coming in. What's my own tone coming into this? I love them. I love the puzzle they present. I enjoy playing against them. But there's one or two things that I don't enjoy about the gameplay aspect. Not necessarily the design. I think the design for the most part is excellent, as I say, and it presents a very difficult puzzle. But anyway, that is just the general gist of me and how I feel about it. We're actually getting up here, and I'm going to bring the panel up on the screen finally here, and we are going to start and look at the adversary panel. So, of course, let's go, and we'll start at the top left of the card here, as we always do, and talk about the additional loss condition. This is called Hunters Swarm the Island, and it says, put beasts destroyed by the adversary rules on this panel. If there are ever more beasts on this panel than on the island, the invaders win. Okay, so, something new. Nothing up until this point in this game really has destroyed beasts as such. They do kind of get, well, I suppose they get sacrificed by events, and they get sacrificed by certain spirit powers. You know, there's, I think Sharp Fangs has a right in 8 that does it. There's a couple of obviously mages in the deck that kind of go ahead and kind of sacrifice beasts for things and stuff like that as well. So removing beasts has been something in the game up until now, but this sort of idea of destroyed by the adversary is very much a new thing here. So, of course, we're going to have to expect some kind of rule that goes along with this. But the way this basically works is when beasts get destroyed by this adversary, however that happens, they go on this panel. And if you're basically always doing a check. If there are ever more beasts on the panel than there are on the island, you lose the game. Fair enough. Okay. So usually you start the game with a beast on each board. So it'll be one beast on the board, and then this rule will basically say, okay, there's 0 on here, there's 1 on the board, we're fine. But if ever one gets destroyed and put on the panel, now it's reversed, and there's 1 on the panel, 0 on the board, you lose the game. That's the general gist of how this works. So let's see how that all plays out. Now, moving over here, we have the escalation, and the escalation is called Stalk the Predators. On each board, add 2 explorers total among lands with beasts. If you can't, instead add 2 explorers among lands with beasts on a different board. Okay, so add 2 explorers. That seems maybe sort of slightly easy if you compare that to some of the other escalations on some of the other adversaries. If you think about England's escalation last time out, building and pushing you towards the lost condition with buildings, and maybe building a city and stuff like that. So is this not kind of not too challenging, not too scary? Okay, we'll see. We'll see. But look, the way this works is you can divide these among any beasts that you like on your board, right? So, as I said, we usually start with one beast on the board. If that's the case, we would just have to add the 2 explorers into that land. If we had a power or some other way to increase the number of beasts on the board, well, then we can sort of spread those around among any of the beasts as we like. And as it says here, it's total, right? It's not per beast or anything. So 2 total explorers. And of course, here, the other part here is if you actually don't have a beast on your board, you instead have to add those 2 explorers among the beasts on a different board. And again, that can be chosen kind of across the board there. Excuse the pun. I suppose the thing to note here is that it actually is possible. If you had no beasts on any board, you wouldn't actually have to do an escalation here, which is actually something I did in a game one time. I was actually able to remove all my Russia beasts, and of course I did that before any of them got destroyed by the lost condition rule there. So very early on in the game, I was able to one time. I think Pent Up Calamity was one of the main ways that I did it. And I just quickly removed all my beasts. Actually, do you know what? I think it was might have been Draw Towards a Consuming Void. Doesn't that pull beasts in and destroy beasts, stuff like that? I think that might have been how I did it. But yeah, I managed to get rid of all the beasts very early on in the game in Russia, and it essentially turned off the lost condition and the escalation, which was pretty cool. So bear in mind, it's not likely to come up, but it can. Now, that's our kind of our top of our panel here. We of course have 6 levels of difficulty. We always do, and as printed here, as you'll probably see on the screen, they go up as far as a difficulty 11 on the 6 levels. Fear cards, of course, start with a 3-3-3, and at level 6 they go all the way to a 5-5-4. That is 14 fear cards, and that is in joint second place. I believe there are 3 total adversaries who have 14 fear cards, Russia being one of them. So that's kind of all of that. Let's just get into it. So level 1 is called Hunters Seek, Shell, and Hide. This says during setup on each board, add a beast and an explorer to the highest numbered land without buildings. During play, explorers do +1 damage. And when Ravage adds a blight to a land, including cascades, destroy a beast in that land. So all sorts of things happening here as part of this as part of this rule. It's quite busy, and it's giving us lots of insight into how Russia is going to work here. So lots to pay attention to. So first of all, during setup on each board, we're going to get an extra beast. Okay, fair enough. So now what I talked about before with 1 beast, now we have 2 on each board, so that's fine. And we're going to get an explorer. So we're starting to see explorers mentioned again here. I wonder why. Add explorer and a beast to the highest numbered land without building. So that kind of goes in its own land. I think there is 1 total board in the game, board F possibly. Maybe one of the G or H boards does this as well. I can't quite remember. But there is definitely at least 1 board where the beast you add into the highest numbered land also coincidentally aligns to the regular starting beast, because it's also the lowest numbered land without pre-printed setup icons. It's like land 7 or something like that, and it ends up being the land that takes 2 beasts at the start of the game. So something to look out for there. That can be a bit tricky, but that's the way that works. But now straight after, during play, explorers do +1 damage. Okay, here we go. The beginning of the identity of this adversary straight off the bat. Remember what I said about the escalation and 2 explorers not being quite as scary as some of the others? Starting to look a bit scarier here, aren't we? +1 damage, 2 damage from every explorer. That's a blight. That's just a blight. That's killing a hand. That's causing you all sorts of problems. Explorers are supposed to be the things that we don't have to care about in this game for the most part. Usually we just they're an afterthought, but not against Russia. Not by a long shot. And then finally, as it says here, when Ravage adds blight to a land, including cascades, destroy a beast in that land. And this is, of course, going to link back in with the lost condition, and it is going to give us a way for the adversary to actually destroy the beast and push towards their lost condition. It should be pointed out here, and it's quite interesting here, that if you play Russia at level 0, with just the escalation on the lost condition doesn't do anything because it can't, the adversary can't actually destroy the beast. So that's quite interesting that it actually doesn't come into play until you play level 1. Interesting here. Lots going on, as I say, and we're starting to get a feel for how the adversary works. So let's jump for level 2. A sense for impending disaster. The first time each action would destroy an explorer. If possible, one of those, would destroy explorers. If possible, one of those explorers is instead pushed. 1 fear when you do so. Okay. Yeah. They're unkillable. They do +1 damage, and you can't kill them, is essentially what we're saying here. Well, okay, not that you can't kill any explorers, but whenever you kill explorers, one of them is always going to run away. So that's essentially what's happening here. So for the first time each action, this is very important. Before we even say what it does, the wording here is important. Each action. Now, of course, there are like 2 pages in the rule book around actions. When Jagged Earth came out, they sort of had this whole new sort of revision around what an action is and all these other kind of things here. So I'm not going to get into that right now, but I presume that anyone listening to me or most people would have an idea about what an action is. It's one of them where you kind of often have to go and look and clarify with the quirky or something. It's like, is this counted as an action? How does this work? But usually, of course, an action is a power, an innate, an ability, a power card, or whatever. But also things like events, fear cards, all those kind of things are all actions. Ravages, those kind of things are actions. But here you've got this idea of if you do a kind of a global effect across the board, all beasts do X, or something like that. Each land will be considered its own action. So that's important here. So the first time each action would destroy explorers, any number, if possible, one of them is instead pushed, and you generate a fear when you do so. So if I would do 3 damage in a land, I've got 1 power, it deals 3 damage in a land. That's 1 action. There's 3 explorers in that land. 2 of them will die as normal. The 3rd will not die, and it'll instead be pushed, and I will generate a fear. Very, very challenging. Really hard. And again, massively identity defining. It's funny because with other adversaries, I feel like there's 1-2 rules which define what the adversary is. This bloody adversary, it's almost every single rule. They all cripple you. They're all so hard, and they all work together in such an appalling way. So here, they're just so hard to get rid of. Everything you do that destroys explorers just pushes them away. It generates loads of fear. So there is a good thing to be said here for this is a way to potentially make lots of fear, which can be nice, of course, because we like to get fear and win the game, right? We want loads of that. We want as much as possible, surely. We'll come back to that in that sentence momentarily. But they're just so hard to get rid of. And as I say, they deal +1 damage. So it's like every explorer is a problem, and you just can't get rid of them. So, okay, that's level 2. Level 3, competition among hunters. Ravage cards also match lands with 3 or more explorers. If the land already matched the Ravage card, it still ravages just once. Okay. That doesn't sound great. Let's break this down and understand what we mean here. If we have 3 or more explorers in a land, that land now matches each Ravage card. Each one. If it matched already, doesn't matter, right? So if the sand's in the Ravage space and I've got 10 explorers in the sands, doesn't matter. There's no impact for this turn. It'll just ravage normally. If I have a sands with 10 explorers in it and the Ravage space is a jungle, it will still Ravage. It matches the Ravage card. So we've got this kind of HME type thing going on here, albeit Russia came first, of course. But this idea of, you know, in HME's case, it's 3 invaders in the land, and then it ravages if there's 3 invaders when the salt card is out. Here, it's when there's 3 explorers in the land. Now it's going to match the card. And this is a nightmare. And by the way, this can match multiple cards. So what I just described there, 10 explorers in the sands. If the Ravage card contains a mountain and a jungle, it's going to match both. It's going to Ravage twice. It's so awful. Oh, it's so awful. And needless to say, if there's 3 explorers in there, each of them alone, the 3 of them alone is dealing 6 damage. So they Ravage for loads as well. It's just awful. Now, if there's no Ravage card, you don't Ravage. So that's one thing to bear in mind here. So, you know, sometimes in the game, the event or something, or a fear card more likely will kind of say, don't do the next build, you know, leave it in the space and kind of do twice next turn type of thing. So sometimes you end up in a spot where there's no cards in the Ravage space. That's a reprieve. So it won't match the Ravage card because there are no Ravage cards. So just bear that in mind. It won't actually Ravage if there's no Ravage card. So that's a little one to make sure you don't slip up on. The other one to check here, so there's kind of multiple rules around this. Basically, the way the check works, when you go to resolve a Ravage card, you go ahead and you look and you qualify all of your ravaging lands at the beginning. Before you do any of them, you qualify which ones Ravage. Okay, all my jungles, or maybe 2 of my jungles, 2 of them are empty or whatever. You set the qualifying lands and you sort of fix them. So let's say, for argument's sake, I have, I don't know, 3 explorers in a land that ravages. It matches the Ravage card. It qualifies. If I then go and ravage in that land, let's say maybe I defended the land, the hand fight back, they wipe out 2 of the explorers and one of them gets pushed into an adjacent land. But all of my adjacent lands only have 2 explorers. So now I push one in and it becomes up to 3 explorers. That will not now Ravage because it did not qualify at the start of the check. So the check is done before you go ahead and do any of the Ravage actions. That's important. However, in Russia's case, you will most likely end up in spots where you have 2 cards in the Ravage slot. We'll talk about why in a moment, but for now, trust me. So in that spot, let's reverse back and we'll look at the same example. 3 explorers. They match the first land and it ravages. 1 gets pushed into an adjacent land, which already had 2 explorers. Now it goes up to 3. As I said, that will not match the first card. But when the first card is finished resolving, now we go to the second card. Now we check again. So now that second land that I talked about that just had an explorer push into it, now it will match. So that's how that works. So you kind of check it on each card. Hopefully that makes sense. An important one here, because Russia does this kind of stuff where it pushes stuff all over the place. You're constantly checking and sort of analyzing, do I put my lands to 2? Do I put them to 1? Do I push them to 3? All this kind of stuff. So it comes up a lot because of that level 2 rule, of course. That's how that works. Now, level 4, accelerated exploitation. When making the invader deck, put 1 stage 3 card after each stage 2 card. So the new deck order goes 1 1 1 2 3 2 3 2 3 2 3 3. Ouch. It just ouch. 2 3 2 3 2 3. It's just awful. It is every bit as bad as it sounds. It's hideous. We've talked before in the past about Brandenburg Prussia and their propensity to have back-to-backs because they start with a 3, or depending on the level, right? Depending on sort of which level you play them at. If you play level 6, they start with the 3. If you play level sort of 3 or 4, somewhere in the middle, the 3 goes in after the sort of 1. It goes something like 1 3 2 2, whatever. So the 3 gets pushed near the start, and the 3 getting pushed up near the start gives you this higher likelihood of having back-to-backs in your game. Here, we're just putting 3s everywhere in the deck. it's like every turn is almost nearly guaranteed to be a bloody back-to-back. It's just awful. And of course, because you're doing Ravages in the lands with the triple explorers, it's like back-to-back-to-back. It's like triple back-to-backs. It's all sorts of just really, really nasty, nasty stuff. And of course, every explorer is a problem. So it's like, you just cleared the land the previous turn. Let's say you cleared the land on the build of the 2. So you went 1-1-1, and then you've got the 2. So let's say after the 2 builds, or before it builds, before the 2 builds, you wipe the land. You push the explorer out. They don't build, so you pocket or whatever the land. Happy days. It's not going to Ravage next turn. Oops, you've got a stage 3 card. It's 50-50 to put an explorer back in that land again. Come on. I mean, come on. 1 explorer blights the land. It's just awful. It's just awful. Okay, that's level 4. Level 5. Entrench in the face of fear. Put an unused stage 2 invader card under the top 3 fear cards, and an unused stage 3 card under the top 7 fear cards. When one is revealed, immediately place it in the build space face up. The fear bombs. Oh, God. The fear bombs. Oh. I talked before on the Habsburg Livestock episode about how Habsburg 4, the durable towns, might be the single most challenging level on any card in adversary card in the game. This might give it a run for its money. This, if you haven't played against it, might seem seemingly, slightly innocuous. Just, no stress. It just sits in there in the fear deck. Don't worry about it. We'll worry about it later. It's fine. It's miles away. 7 fear cards? No, don't worry about that. That should be okay. No, it's awful. It's just so awful. This gives you the same type of gameplay experience that England give you. I'm not going to break this too much down here in terms of, how the impact on the game is, because we'll talk about that later. But England was very much about, it takes a while to get going, right? You've got the high immigration tile, and you don't start sort of doing the double builds on the high immigration until later, and all this kind of stuff, right? You've got a few turns to kind of get going. This is the same kind of idea. You've got a few turns to get going. Very often against Russia, you feel like you're in it. You feel like you're on top of it. No problem. No stress. Have this under control. They're only explorers. No hassle. And then, bam, fear bomb, number 1 drops, and your entire game falls apart so quickly. This gives you inevitability like almost no other rule in the entire game does. It's horrendous. Place it into the slot. So let's talk about this. So it sits under the top 3 fear cards, right? So first of all, that's not that many fear cards. 3 fear cards down, happy days, we're doing good in the game. Bam, fear bomb, straight into the build slot. Ouch. Once we get to the build slot, so nothing happens on in the exact moment, nothing happens. It goes in and it goes under the whatever's in the build slot at the time. So it'll be resolving after whatever's there already, type of thing. So now we get to the invader stage. We do our Ravage, no problem. We go to our build. We build whatever was there already. Then we go and we activate or resolve the new Fear Bomb card that got put there. If it's the stage 2 card, which is the first one under the top 3 cards, if it's that one, if it's a stage 2 and it's not coastal, it will have an escalation symbol on it. You have to also resolve the escalation, which is really important. And I wish they had written that on this card, because that is not clear, and you don't know that until you actually go ahead and read the rules. So I feel like that was a bit of a slip up here. I'd say if they did a second edition of this game, they'd probably write that on this as a reminder. You have to escalate, which is rough. And then, of course, you build on the land. And then, oh, by the way, once you're finished and you go down and you do your explore, shift everything left. Now you've got 2 cards in the Ravage slot for next turn, which is why, as I said before, you very often against this adversary will have spots where you've got 2 cards in the Ravage slot. This is deplorable. It's horrific. You do them the first one and it like train wrecks your game. And then you're like, how can I possibly recover from that? Oh, wait, in a few more turns, I'm going to have to do that again with a stage 3 card. Ouch, is all I can say. Let's continue on and look at level 6. Pressure for fast profit. After the Ravage step of turn 2 plus, on each board where it added no blight, in the land with the most explorers, minimum 1, add a explorer and a town. Great. Just great. So I didn't add any blight. I'm doing well? No, you're not. Have an explorer in the town. Oh, you didn't like explorers? No, because they ravage everywhere and they deal +1 damage and you can't kill them. Tough luck. Have one. Plus a town. Oh, and by the way, that's in the land with the most explorers, so now it probably contains 3. Now it's ravaging next turn. Oh, excuse me. Oh, God. Oh, Lord. It is just all kinds of deplorable. I talked last time out in the England episode about the very first time I read the England card. And I just couldn't believe that could be possible to beat. It just sounded impossible, like not even remotely possible. It sounded like just this completely ridiculous scenario of things I could never possibly beat that. I'm not sure Russia has the same effect, and I don't think it had the same effect on me. I got all of my content at the same time. When I bought the game, Jagged Earth had already been out and stuff like that, so I got like, Branch Claw, Jagged Earth base. I pretty much got them all together. And I distinctly remember England sounding so impossible, but I don't remember at the time being, it's maybe not quite as obvious when you read Russia why this is so bad. It's every single rule together. It's the perfect storm of impossible. It's just every rule is so well integrated to cause you problems. Now, we're going to hear from plenty of people about the design of this and how the sort of rules interact and how the gameplay experience from all the rules. And suffice to say, spoiler alert, many people do not enjoy that. And many people have problems with how this all gets sort of implemented and everything like that. So, it's when I say it's a perfect storm of thing, a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy that experience. Despite this being my least favorite adversary, as I say, I do quite enjoy that experience. I like hard things. I've talked about it before. I like extreme mode. I like getting challenged a lot, and I like to go in the tank, surprise, surprise, and try to figure out solutions. And these give you problems that you need to find solutions for. Every rule is a problem in and of itself, but each rule compounds on the other ones so effectively. It's horrendous. That's all I'm going to say on that. We're going to finish up on the adversary panel. That's the panel. We're going to get to the community interaction right after I have a big old sup of breakfast porter. Coffee is there. It's definitely lighter than an Imperial Stout. I don't know that I've ever had a porter this strong before. I've had plenty of Imperial Stouts, and I kind of went off them a little bit. I drank a lot of them for a while, but they ended up giving me like lots of headaches and stuff. It's like 12, 13%, and you're drinking these things. I'll probably end up with a banging headache after drinking this, but it is a bit lighter than those Imperial Stouts. The Imperial Stouts are like, you find a lot of them dessert stouts, full of sugar. Rich vanilla this, chocolate this, toffee this, whatever. And it's like eating a dessert, so heavy. Some of them quite delicious, a bit of it, but then by the time you get to the end of a big can, it's like, wow, this is way too much. So this is a lot sort of lighter and thinner than a lot of those Imperial Stouts. Bit more drinkable, I would say, than some of them. Very strong. flavor profile. Coffee, as I say, chocolate. There's a bit of sweetness, but it's not overly sweet. It's dark and it's rich, as I say. It's enjoyable. But you wouldn't be sipping these on a summer day now, suffice to say. Highly bitter, needless to say. Highly bitter. Yeah. Not bad. Now, it wouldn't be my favourite beer. I won't lie to you either. I wouldn't be buying it again. But it's a nice celebration beer. Nice to try. I do enjoy trying lots of different experiences. And this is certainly an experience. I will say that. Now, I'll have some water as well before we continue. Licorice is the other flavour that I couldn't quite pick out. Now I'm having it on the aftertaste. Lingering licorice flavour off that too. Not the biggest licorice fan. Maybe that's why I was having a little bit of a doubt and a question mark there. Anyway, we shall continue on. Community interaction. Let's get into it. So, very, very divisive in the chat. Russia is very divisive. As England kind of was before as well. Here there were strong opinions. Lots of people disliking Russia. A lot. And some people loving them as well. A little bit again, like I said last time with England, a bit of a Marmite situation here. And we'll get into all of that now. We'll start with the dislikes. I'd like to get them out of the way, as I say. So we'll start with the dislikes here, and we'll start off with a humdinger, as I say. Blacker Spork came in with some strong words around Russia. So I think let's start here. Russia is the only part of Spirit Island that I hate. Not just dislike, I hate. Not fun to play. I fought it over and over specifically for the pleasure of beating it, but not even that could save this adversary. So the explorers gain unfun buffs. It sucks that only one is enough to blight. Worst of all is the explorer immunity. It's unsatisfying and a giant mess of rulings. I open Quirky every time we play Russia because we'll need it to resolve some interaction involving the running explorers. And Quirky, if you're not familiar with it, is an excellent website. It's the FAQ website for Spirit Island. It's got a whole pile of stuff in there around sort of corner case scenarios with how each cards, adversaries, spirits, and all that work. So I definitely understand this. I've had to Google plenty around how some of the stuff with Russia works. The invader cards in the fear deck also have confusing rulings. They escalate when they resolve, which isn't written anywhere in the adversary panel. At first my group didn't know we had to do those escalations, then later we thought they happened when the card got revealed. Fun quirk. With this misunderstanding, you essentially lose if it happens in the fast phase, or worse from an event. You can even go from a fully healthy island to a blight loss in that one invader phase. And what they're describing there is, as I say, the escalation happens when you actually reach the card in the build phase. But if they did it the way the way Blacker Spork said, if you, like, let's say, flip the card up in the event step, for example, you would what they were doing was do the escalation then, which might force two explorers into a land with the beast that already has one, which then forces it to ravage and all this kind of stuff, which is terrible news. It does that anyway. But it just, at least when you do it in the build step, it's already past the ravage, so you're kind of you've got a turn to sort of figure it out. Now, Russia 6, take blight please, is kind of alright, but with all the frustrations of this adversary, it's usually just another source of unfun. The problem so far, being penalised for playing. You get penalised if you defend, the Russia 6 rule. If you do the usual trick of letting one explorer die to a ravage, +1 damage. If you play around the escalation, it jumps to another board. If you gain fear, the invader fear cards, and even if you kill explorers because they generate fear and run to adjacent lands where they might trigger an auto ravage. The invader deck alternates between stage 2 and stage 3, which increases the odds of consecutive cards of the same land type. So that's your back-to-backs there. And that's even worse and luck dependent here than usual. It means those lands you had to push 2 explorers to now get a third, which means auto ravages, which means fighting explorers, which means fear invader bombs. Then you learn that 3+ explorers match each card in the ravage slot, and it's another confusing ruling that makes the game get messy. Now, they continue on and they say the last condition is frustrating in gameplay and mind-boggling thematically. Too many beasts die, so everyone dies? The name implies lots of hunters show up, which doesn't sound as bad as the invasion you're already dealing with. Too arbitrary. Events are terrible. Beast damage may help, but events consider explorers not to be big threats, so there are events which place a ton of them. We once ran out of explorer pieces in a 3-player game. Jesus, that sounds hideous. Lure is amazing versus Russia, but we didn't know. We thought Lure only prevents explorers from attacking, not that it also excludes them from the 3+ explorers equal Ravage rule. It's not obvious the way it's written. Was real fun playing a strong spirit into the matchup only to accidentally make it weak. This adversary needs clearer rules, less penalising the players for playing the game, and less randomness. Finally, the only 2 good things I see in this 50 rulings issued in a trench coat of an adversary are Solo Shadows crushes Russia in 3 to 4 turns, and Grant Hatred a Ravenous Form can abuse Russia. Since one explorer always survives, choose the one with the most strife, and if you have an explorer with lots of strife on it, it will explode in its land, then the explorer runs away with the strife intact. The threshold even adds 1 more strife. Everywhere that explorer goes, people explode. Now, I went and I pulled up Grant Hatred a Ravenous Form, because I read this comment from Blacker Spork and I thought, oh my god, a use case for Grant Hatred Ravenous Form. Amazing. I've been wanting to get this thing on the channel. I'd love to get a win with Grant Hatred on the channel. Let me pull this up and maybe I have a chance to do that in the future. Let's have a look and read Grant Hatred Ravenous Form. Cost 4. Gives you a moon and a fire. Speed slow, range 1, target land any. For each strife, for each strife and blight in target land, 1 fear and 2 damage. If this destroys all invaders in target land, add a beast. And then if you have 4 moon and 2 fire, add a strife in up to 3 adjacent lands. Now, call me old-fashioned, if you will. If you have to, call me old-fashioned. But when I play against the hardest adversary in the game, and I read Grant Hatred a Ravenous Form, this doesn't abuse Russia at all, Blackersburg. This card is stone unplayable in every single sense of the word, and I don't know how you've somehow come to the conclusion that strifing single explorers in Russia's case is the way that you beat this adversary. Now, I'm sorry, Blackersport, to beat up on you. I'm not beating up on you. I'm beating up on Grant Hatred of Ravenous Form. That card couldn't be more unplayable if it tried. It's the worst card in the deck, I think, by a distance. I think it's way worse than the other horrible ones. And I just do not understand how that possibly beats Russia. Russia is this horror show of a thing, and that is just dealing like a piddly couple of damage and maybe get some strife in adjacent lands. I'm willing to be wrong, and by all means, do get me in the chat here, folks. Fight back. Fight Blackerspork's corner here and tell me why I'm wrong that Grant Hatred of Ravenous Form does, in fact, beat Russia. But as far as I'm concerned, if I'm going against the hardest adversary in the game, I do not want the worst card in the game to do it. But look, thanks, Blackerspork. Yeah, I mean, look, you've covered a whole bunch of stuff here, and we will hear sort of repeats on some of this stuff in different forms all throughout the inputs here. Being penalised for playing, absolutely. Some confusion around rules, some rules being fiddly, absolutely. You know, these are valid concerns here, and you are very much backed by many other people on most of what you've said. No one is backing you on Grant Hatred. I hate to tell you, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. There's nobody in the chat that seemed to be to back you on that one. But as I say, down in the chat on this video, you might find one or two. Now, not Brandon, Jaspers comes in and says, Russia is my least played and least favourite adversary. While the Explorer and Beast shenanigans are bad enough, the fact that they punish you so much for doing well in the game at level 5 and 6 means I just have very little desire to play them, especially at the level I usually like to play. Level 5 means you're punished for pushing the fear deck forward, which you have to do considering there's very few ways to get a terror level win. Then level 6 punishes you for not taking Blight. Having one is bad enough, but both is just rough. I don't mind the Blight thing HME has going on nearly as much because you can always just take some Blight to turn it off. that's HME. I didn't accent the right word in that sentence there. I don't mind the blight thing that HME has going on nearly as much, because you can always just take some blight to turn it off. That sentence was better. Levels 1 to 3 are fine and interesting on their own, but the later levels just really turn me off from them. So, punish you for doing well. Again, of course, it goes without saying, Russia absolutely cripple you for doing well, which is, I think, a great thing. I have no problem with that in an adversary. I think it's good design for them to do that. It can be frustrating, and god damn it, it's difficult as hell, but I don't personally have a problem with that. I think that's good. But of course, some other people just don't enjoy that. So that's completely fine. This idea here, you're punished for pushing the fear deck forward, and you have to push the fear deck forward because there's very few ways to get a tier level 1 win. Completely reasonable. It is very hard to get a tier level win against these, so you are going to have to get fear cards to get the tier level 2. But I should point out, I actually almost did beat Russia in tier level 1 once with Volcano. I got them down to one single explorer. I can still remember the game. I was desperately trying to get the tier level 1 win. I was trying so hard, and no matter what I did, I just couldn't. It kept getting scared. The explorer, I couldn't figure out a way to get it together, because, Volcano's special rule kind of deals damage in multiple lands. You can kind of push explorers this way and that way. And I found like 1 or 2 isolation powers, so I was able to almost get rid of them all. But I couldn't get the last one over the line. And by the time I did, it pushed me into tier level 2, and then I got the tier level 2 win. I was essentially one explorer away. But anyway, yeah, look, you're almost never beating Russia with a tier level 1 win. That's completely fair. And of course, then, as they say here, you get level 6 punishes you for not taking blight, which is rough. And we'll pick up on that one later on, but plenty of people mention it. They say here, if you compare it to HME, and there are a lot of sort of parallels to be drawn, let's say, with HME and Russia, we already talked about. You can sort of just take some blight and turn it off, whereas you can't ever turn off Russia 6. It just keeps going throughout the game, and every single explorer matters, so it matters for the entire game. Not Brandon Jaspers here. Enjoys level 1 to 3, and they won't be the first person to say that. Now, Piosh FD. Out of all the adversaries I've played against, Russia gives me the most trouble. I know you're supposed to bunch up all the explorers for a big sweep, but it feels easier to say than do, and that's just Russia 3. I know Lure dumpsters them, but they give me nightmares when I'm on any other spirit. Yeah, look, it's kind of, they telegraph it in a way. It's telegraphed, every time you try to kill one explorer, it's going to run away. So don't try kill one explorer. Try kill loads at once, and then only one of the X will run away. It's kind of written on the card, It's kind of obvious that's what you're kind of supposed to do. But of course, every time, as they're saying here, it feels easier to say than do, because when you start bunching them up, they just start ravaging loads, and it becomes really, really hard to get that done. So yeah, far easier said than done by a mile. Agree. Veneretio says, so incredibly annoying. I just hate how fiddly it is. Once I beat it on 6, I knew I'd be unlikely to play it again for a very long time. And it's funny, actually, I went back and checked my own stats on Russia the other day. I played Russia 6 for the channel, of course, as I said, last week. And it was the first time I had played Russia 6 in like 110 games or something like that. And I mentioned before, I've almost played 200 games now. I've got like 195 or something like that. And it had been like 110, maybe 115 games. I hadn't played them at level 6 since it was like my 80th game or something. I've played them a bunch in 6-6 in combos since then. And to be honest, once I got not far past 100, maybe 110, 120, something like that, I started playing a lot of 6-6 games and stuff. So I kind of didn't go back to playing level 6s for quite a while. So that's kind of the main reason. So I have played plenty of Russia since then. I say plenty, they're definitely the ones I've played the least in 6-6s, because they're absolutely horrendous in 6-6s. By far the hardest in my mind, but that's for another day. Yeah, it's funny because for me it actually had been a very long time since I'd played them at level 6 there, so I thought that was quite funny to go back and reflect on. Anyway, Prize Hospital 1943 says, what I dislike most is how random it feels on close games. What makes Russia beatable, in my opinion, is that you can break the explore build ravage cycle and there are no ifs. But you have 2 to 3 stage cards. You've stage 3 cards, I think is what they're saying here, which makes you pray for non-matching empty lands, otherwise the land will blight, as well as not going into lands with 2 explorers that will now have 3. The timing of the Invader Fear cards and subsequent double Ravage is super important, but it is again usually random, since you shouldn't stall an excessive amount of fear. So very much talking about the randomization here, picking up on what I talked about before, is when you hit that stage 3 card and it just puts explorers in all the lands that you had empty. Absolutely awful. And sometimes it's like it puts lands up to 3 explorers, which is worst case scenario type of thing. Then they say you have a lot of beasts, which makes beast event more powerful, and each land effects can lead up to a whole fear card. So getting 2 or 3 of these is an enormous change. In my opinion, Russia strongly needs a semi-deterministic event adversary deck. Something like 15 cards and you select 12 per game. I think every adversary should work that way, but meanwhile others can survive event randomness, Russia has to mitigate the explore effects and give a good approximation of how many beast events you are going to have. If you play a close Russia level 6 game with strict rules, it can be extremely frustrating, or it can feel like you were given a win by getting 20 fear for free. Excuse me. This is what I was talking about. This is essentially the part of Russia that I dislike. Each land effect stuff that I talked about before, with the each action, and then you hit a fear card that says, let's say, all beasts destroy and explore, or something like that. And let's say you're playing with many minds, you've got beasts everywhere. You now start this triggered cascading effect where you start pushing explorers all over the board. And like they say, you just get 20 fear for free because you just get all these silly effects where explorers just get pushed all over the place. You can also trigger this with things like, I think like Angry Mobs. There's 1 or 2 fear cards that do a similar thing as well, where they just start pushing stuff all over the place. And it's just a bit silly to me. It's very inelegant compared to like the rest of the adversary rulings, which are for the most part very elegant and well integrated and carefully considered. Everything just fits together, like I said, into one horrible puzzle. And then all of a sudden you've just got these moments where it's like, it's almost like breaking the fourth wall or something when you're watching a movie, and it's just like, whoa, and it's just like this jarring, stupid moment in the game where it's like, I'm in this really, really difficult, hard battle. I feel like I'm right in the midst of a battle. And then it's just like, bing, 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 like 9 fear or something. And it's just like, I don't know. It just feels a bit silly, and it kind of it doesn't invalidate it or anything like that. You very often need those fear pushes to kind of give you a boost in the game, but it just feels wrong. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of one of the big problems there. I mentioned that I think all of the rules are generally very well sort of conceived and integrated. We've heard already, I think, about the kind of silliness of the thematics on the loss condition. I didn't talk about the loss condition at the time because I just wanted to go through what on the adversary card. 1 or 2 other people will pick up on it here, so I think I'll come back to that one. That comment of everything feels well designed and well conceived. Loss condition maybe not quite so much, but I think 1 or 2 other people pick up on it, so I will pick up on that again when they do. Now, thank you, Prize Hospital. Josephus the Wise. Russia is definitely my least played adversary. They intimidate me. You're not the only one, let me tell you, Josephus. Russia 4 was also my very first adversary of any level. This may be part of the reason Intimidating. You know what, Joseph? You might be right. Very first adversary you ever played in the game was Russia 4. Jesus. Yes, that's the reason why they intimidate you. I didn't do that, but they do intimidate me, as I say. But anyway, I will be trying Russia again soon. But for now, I tend to just keep them in the box. Well, look, Josephus, if you're listening, hopefully you can have a good laugh with me about that. But, you know, as I said, lots of tips and tricks and things later on around how to kind of go about doing that. So, you know, stick around and hopefully we can help you out there. Blaster Sarge comes in and says, Russia is extraordinarily frustrating. In my opinion, it is more edge case prone than France. One explorer push, hell, one explorer damage could be the difference between 0 blight and 6 blight, and that's just not fun to me. Plus, there are numerous effects that remove beasts, so you can easily get screwed by their loss condition, which I feel like is weakly integrated mechanically, even if the theme is there. In a non-obvious way, I think it's even faster paced than Brandenburg Prussia, forcing many or most spirits to play a rush game to win by turn 4 or 5, lest they be completely overwhelmed. In my opinion, it pushes the value of skips harder than Sweden does. It just shuts down so many strategies. And yet, I'm glad Russia exists. It's very unique and offers a massively different experience. It just rankles when the general attitude amongst many players seems to be, France is edge casey and so France is bad. But also, Russia has edge cases, but you just have to get good. So lots in here for me to pick up on here. Is it more edge casey prone than France? I think France might still be number one, but Russia is pushing for it. Russia is bad on edge cases. One explorer damage, as they say, one explorer push, one explorer add. Somebody already mentioned it so far. Events just throw explorers out there willy-nilly, just it's fine, no worries type of thing. You've got one, don't you, where it's like it matches each card that or each land that doesn't contain a building or something like that. I can't remember what you call that one, but it's Frontier Calls or something. No, I don't think it's that one, but yeah, awful. You can get wrecked, absolutely wrecked. Is that unfun to me? No. It just isn't. I mean, there are certain event cards in that deck that are less fun than others, and it's certainly the very swingy ones, like you know, kind of Pharmacy to the Hand for Aid, for example, are among the least fun cards in the deck. That's a completely fair statement to say that the more swingy, the less fun. That's fine. But you know, getting hit by small effects in a way that wrecks your game, that's not the same thing to me. And I say small effects here. Contextually, they may be very huge effects, like add a single explorer could wreck your game. But if I get wrecked by add a single explorer, that doesn't ruin my game. That's not unfun to me. That's just one of them things. That's a moment of tension. That's a moment of drama. It's not the same way as you pull you know, Pharmacy to the Hand for Aid, or some of the other ones that were that were removed from the deck. You know, the Beast one. I never played with that because it was already gone by the time I got the box. But you know, there's a couple in there, and it was just like, okay, this was just a ridiculous. This was just not well balanced at all. This is just far too swingy and punishing, or whatever. Or Numinous Crisis, maybe it's far too strong. That kind of thing. And yes, they're just too big and swingy for any game, or at least the average game. But for me here, that's not quite the same as what we're talking about. So that's kind of all of that. The faster pace than BP, I'm with you on that one, to be honest. You know, it's tough. Those 2-3, 2-3, 2-3 is tough. They don't come out quite as fast as BP do with their stage 3 card up front. BP are very much on the aggression early, like we talked about on the Brandenburg Prussia episode, obviously. But if you shut down that stage 3 card and you skip like 3 of the 4 Ravages, they do fold a little bit. Russia do not fold to anything. Russia never fold. Russia's a grind all the way. So it's less about them being fast paced necessarily, but more maybe about the what they're saying here is they're forcing you to play a rush game. They're forcing you down that path because you get overwhelmed late. I think it's a fair comment. I don't think it forces that. I don't think I quite agree with it forces many spirits to play the rush game, but I think it making it viable is true. That's a way to go about beating Russia, and we'll talk a bit later on again about kind of how you go about doing that. But yeah, getting overwhelmed late on, yeah, 100%. And there's other overlaps with BP where we talk about kind of action economy as well, and again, I'll get into that later on. Now, it pushes the value of skips harder than Sweden does. To an extent, I'd agree. Not quite the same as Sweden. Sweden is the skip adversary. If you have a skip against Sweden, you can't lose, type of thing. If you have a skip against Russia, you can lose. So it's not quite the win that it is against that adversary. But here, this kind of thing of France's edge Casey, and so it's bad, and Russia, so you just have to get good. Funny last little closing point there, Blaster Sarge. I would agree with you to a certain extent. So next, Demi mode. Russia is extremely annoying. You can't get rid of his explorers, and each round they accomplish something bad during Ravage. You can say that again. I played solo as Keeper, Lure, and Starlight against them, and I think that they are best suited to take Russia out. To beat Russia 6, get Blight removal, and let exactly one land Blight each round. Generate Fear in the slow phase, and if able, extra cards in the Fear deck. Generate Fear in the slow phase if able because of the extra cards in the Fear deck, and then focus on powers which remove Explorers. Absolutely nailed it here with basically everything you've said. Keeper, Lure, Starlight, all S tier against this adversary. I've got a little section for spirits later on, and sort of why they're going to be good, so I won't get into it here. Blight removal, yes. Generate Fear in the slow phase, good point here. Controlling when you get those cards to come out is very helpful. If you get the Fear in the slow phase, of course, that kind of gives you the opportunity to loop back around and have more information about when the card flips and what's about to Ravage and all that kind of stuff, what's about to build. If you get that in the slow phase, you throw the card down in the build slot, then you've got the rest of your slow phase, and then you've got a full fast phase next turn to empty those lands essentially. So that's a really nice time to flip it if you can. Now, I'm roasting in this room, so I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to open this window because I thought we'd be all right. I actually closed the window just before starting, which in hindsight was a terrible idea because it's very warm today again. Well, I say it's very warm today. It's not. It's muggy. It's actually not warm. In Ireland, as I mentioned last time, you get rain, which we got today. You get cold in the summer, and then you also get humidity. And the cold and the rain and the humidity somehow all turn into this really warm experience, which is just so highly unpleasant. It's dreadful. So that's all of that. Now, brouhaha, I didn't tell you last time I wasn't going to make the joke again, and I won't. I'm going to show discipline. The only thing they have going for them is that they're not England. Being punished for killing explorers, for not killing explorers, for generating fear, for not generating fear. It's just not a super fun adversary to engage with. Yeah, look, you do get punished for killing and not killing and generating fear and not generating fear. It's absolutely true. They have a stranglehold on you from every single direction. Is that super fun to engage with? Totally depends on the person. For me, it's pretty fun. It's horrible, but that's fun. For you, for lots of other people, horrible is not fun. And again, that's a completely subjective thing. So thanks, brouhaha. Totally understand. Nora Adrenaline, give me a sip of beer and we'll read this one. This is good fun. I've yet to figure out how to reliably work around the Russia fear bombs. I have occasionally beaten them, but it's as much a matter of luck as anything, depending on the spirits, of course. They're the only adversary I sometimes play at difficulty 4 instead of 5 or 6. Just because, those fear bombs. Everything else I can handle, but they are just so brutal to me. You're disincentivized to rush fear, but you can't control the buffed explorers without generating a ton of fear. So, how? I've talked about this elsewhere, but once I managed to snatch a victory from the jaws of hopeless defeat against Russia by setting up 2 adjacent call to guard lands with twin days and queuing up as many fear cards as I could. This created a runway process where any event or fear effect that destroyed or pushed explorers would instead ping-pong them through the guarded lands and accumulate fear faster than I ran through fear card effects. It took me from Terror 2 straight to victory right before a brutal double Ravage phase that would have blighted the island twice over. Very weird end to a game, probably the most memorable I've ever had, and possibly the only time in history that Russia 5 has been defeated by mud and base mist. This is so good. So Nora actually had said this to me online a few months back in a different post. This is such a cool story. So let me break down what happened here. So Call to Guard. Let's bring that one up and have a look at it first. Call to Guard. I actually wish I had it beside me here. I don't, but the way it works is essentially you generally use it for as a defend power. You gather the hand and you can kind of defend the land and all of that. But it has this sort of secondary mode which says whenever explorers get kind of pushed into the land, you can ping them for damage. So they had that card, and then they had Twin Days. So Gift of Twin Days, of course, lets you kind of repeat the lowest cost card in play. So they were able to kind of call to guard twice in 2 adjacent lands using the card Twin Days. So essentially, you've got 2 lands adjacent to each other that have this effect that says whenever a thing goes in there, ping it for 1. And then they just queued up a whole bunch of like fear cards and stuff like that, which would create this kind of process of pinging lands, and like you have like beasts kind of adjacent and things like that. So like the event goes like beast damage, ping a beast, deals 1 damage, pushes it into the call to guard land, deals another damage, pushes it into the other land, deals another damage. Each one of them is a fear. So they had like a whole bunch of effects, and then they've got like 4 fear cards, and it's like each fear card is like ping it or deal 1 damage to an explorer or something, and then it's just all this kind of pushing and moving and all this kind of stuff. And you can keep doing the same explorer back and forward. You can just keep pushing it left to right as long as it's a new action. So every fear card is a new action. Like I said, every event that pings things in multiple lands, all of that kind of stuff is all new events. So they just basically went through like a half of the entire fear deck in like one invader phase, or in one like event and fear phase or something like that. So that was super, super cool and fun and unique type of gameplay. I will say again, like I said before, generally speaking, this stupid stuff of pushing stuff around with Russia, I find very silly. I will concede when something like this is set up and it's like super combo, this is amazing. This is fantastic. But you still get the light version of this in like a lot of random games where you didn't set anything up and it kind of just happens and you didn't even work for it and it sort of just happens, which is as I say, a bit silly. But anyway, Nora, again, as always, thank you so much. Really enjoyed that one. A lot of fun. Now, Flimsy Preparation 85. If anybody can solo Russia as Haven River or ThunderSpeaker, please let me know how. Also, Darkfire eats Russia for breakfast. ThunderSpeaker, absolutely believe it. They're the destroy buildings adversary, or one of them. So I can totally understand how ThunderSpeaker does not like playing against Russia. Haven River, defensive spirit, not really gonna do it, is it? So yeah. And Darkfire eats Russia for breakfast. Interestingly enough, you point that out. You're the second person who said Shadows destroys Russia. I think Red Revenge has Darkfire as a C, and all the other variants of Shadows as at least a D, if not an F. I think into Russia. Now he sort of says that was a year ago, and some of them were sort of just like he took some guidance and stuff like that. So I don't know in hindsight whether he would have changed his mind on that before now. I think Darkfire is generally underrated by him. Whether he again still has the same opinion or not, I think Darkfire is a lot better than the other variants of Shadows, and I can 100% see how Darkfire would be good into Russia. C matchup doesn't feel right to me, especially if you hear someone saying it eats it for breakfast. Eating something for breakfast generally means an A or an S matchup. So C doesn't feel right to me there on that one. I have to admit. Now, Apprehensive Tie, I think this is our last dislike before we go to the likes. Apprehensive Tie 32 says, I'm here for all the Russia slander. Someone should make a diss track about them. That was good fun. And that was after seeing a lot of people come in and say they dislike them. I was laughing and I was saying a good name for the diss track might be A Sense for Your Impending Disaster. A diss track from an Eminem or something like that. So that could be a bit of fun. Anyway, that is all of that. Jokes are a lot less fun when you have to explain them, aren't they? I'm not sure why I explained my joke there, to be honest with you. But anyway, I'm certainly not cutting that one out. That'll stay in. That's a blunder. That'll go down as a blunder. Speaking of blunders, this beer tastes really strongly of licorice. I am not going to lie to you. There's a lot of licorice in the background here. It took me a while to pick it up. I feel like I might have been in denial at the beginning. But anyway, we'll keep going. We won't be pouring beer down the sink. That doesn't happen in this house. This household does not waste drink. We'll pour another glass and we'll see how that goes. See where that takes us. Let's see. This should be colder at least than what I just finished out the previous one. It's better cold. That's the thing. That's exactly what it is. That's the difference. You know, wine and a lot of drinks, whiskey and all these kind of things, you get them out in the glass and they need time to come to room temperature, aerate, oxygenate, all these kind of fancy, snobby sort of things that people talk about with booze. But it's true that temperature changes beer. If you over chill a beer, put it in the freezer, you forget about it, and it gets a little too close to freezing. It completely ruins the taste of the beer. You just like kind of get this shock factor or something when you drink it, and you just can't taste the flavors nearly as much. That beer is actually not bad. It's quite nice actually coming out of the bottle, I have to say. There's a reason I started with saying, hey, that's not too bad. And now I'm after tasting it there again. Quite nice. I can see the kind of gas and everything rising inside and stuff like that. It comes out fresh and cold because it's in my fantastic ice bath over there. However, once it sits there for about a half an hour and then I drink the dregs of it at the bottom and it's quite warm, it tastes like just straight up licorice. I'm not going to lie. It's not quite doing it for me. So I have to drink it faster. Which I admit with 12.5% beer is not a great tactic. Nor a great strategy. We're about strategies and tactics on this channel, aren't we? And that might not be a great strategy to rush through that beer. Anyway, I digress. Back to our comments here and our likes this time around. Let's get positive. Beta Gin comes back in. Clearly people have some strong feelings about this adversary. Absolutely true. That makes sense to me since in my opinion it has the most adversary specific tech. Things like blight removal, explore removal, bulk explore destruction, beast stuff, skips, etc. And it forces you to play its game more than many other adversaries. To me, it only makes sense that as more adversaries are added, they're going to have more quirky mechanics. I don't love that, but it just makes sense to be the case. Forces you to play its game. Love that sentence, Beta. Beta always has great sentences. That's another great one. It absolutely does force you to play its game more than basically any other adversary. England is probably the other one that you can probably argue. But yeah, I think Russia just, if you don't play its game, you're dead. So I haven't played it enough to give a super rigorous breakdown, but overall I have enjoyed it well enough thus far. It does get very difficult at high level. I must admit that I like slower adversaries and how they let me play a longer range strategy, and Russia fills that, but in a very unique way. Really, my only nitpick is level 5. The adversary does need some extra staying power, which level 5 provides, but I don't care for the implementation. The fear deck is a fickle mechanic to begin with, especially with how it interacts with larger games. I don't think it's a great thing to tie mechanics into, especially in a way that adds drawbacks to fear generation. So a couple of things here. We already talked about the first bit. The long range strategy. Yes, Russia fills that in a very unique way. So, somebody before talked about sort of Russia forcing you to go early. And forces you to rush, similar to Brandenburg Prussia. That's one way to look at them. That's one way to approach them. Here, Beta's talking about the other end of the spectrum, about letting you play longer range and build towards a late game type of thing. And they do that in a unique way. And I like that sentence. It's a unique way to do it. It's not the same as England. It's not the same as Scotland. It's not the same as Habsburg. Those three adversaries do kind of push you to the late game, but in different ways. Russia doesn't push you to the late game, but it allows you to kind of look for a late game as one option. Which again gives you strategic depth, which I like. The Beta here talks about level 5 and the deplorable nature of level 5. They say that they don't like the fear deck being a mechanic you should tie an adversary rule to. I appreciate this. I appreciate the comment, and is the only person who commented this. Especially with how it interacts with larger games. And as we know, or as you may know, there's plenty of discussion around fear and how it scales, and what the impact is on smaller and larger games and those kind of things. I'm not getting into that right now, but you just take, for argument's sake, a card like Paralyzing Fright. Generates 8 fear. You do that in a single player game, it's 2 fear cards, unless you're playing against England. You do that in a larger game, might be half a fear card. Now, the scaling effect of 4 fear per player is fair and balanced, because in one player game you have to generate 4 fear. In a large player, it's 4 per player. So in theory, it scales the same, but not in reality. In reality, you draw Paralyzing Fright and you just cycle through the fear deck and almost nothing else matters. But in a larger game, that doesn't work the same way. So that's what they're getting at here with Beta Jin, saying it's a fickle mechanic. Larger games, things get thrown off quite a bit. This kind of stuff. Fear Spirits, for example, very strong into kind of, fear rush tactics at lower levels, but at higher levels it might invalidate almost everything they're doing because no one else is keeping up, this kind of stuff. So that's enough. It's enough on that topic for now. But the point here is that Beta is saying they don't like tying an adversary mechanic to that. And I can hear that. Do I agree? I don't think so. As I said, it's obnoxiously difficult. And obnoxiously difficult isn't a problem for me. So from a difficulty perspective, that's not an issue. But I also don't think that's what Beta's saying here. They're not saying it about the difficulty. They're saying with it about maybe how that factor doesn't quite balance across the number of players. You maybe run into the same balancing factor issues that you do with the other thing. And I think that's not a bad comment to make. I appreciate the comment. Do I agree with it or not? I'm actually not fully sure. I'm probably a bit on the fence, to be honest. I'm probably about halfway between agree and disagree. I'll sit on the fence on that one because I like the comment. I think it's insightful, as Beta always is. But the final sentence, especially in a way that adds drawbacks to fear generation, that bit I do disagree with. I do disagree that that's a problem. I think adding drawbacks to fear generation is fantastic. I love that this adversary does that. I hate the rule because it's so hard, but I love the rule at the same time because it's so hard. So I think punishing the player for gaining fear is magnificent. I think it's brilliant, and I definitely would not change that. But I do appreciate the fact here that this doesn't quite scale and balance across the number of players, and that's potentially an issue. So anyway, enough on that one. Thanks, Beta, as always. Gooseman, here we go. Gooseman's a gamer. I hate adversaries where the Explorer alone can cause a Ravage Blight condition. I'm looking at you, France. I hate adversaries with super fiddly rules. Yo, HME. I hate adversaries that add extra ravages just because you have a few invaders in the land. Again, HME. So why do I kind of like Russia despite its annoying faults? So, the invader minigame is just too fun. Frustrating, yes. Annoying, yes. Fiddly, yes. But I just find it plain fun, and it adds what I find an interesting level of strategy. I've only beaten Russia 6 twice, and once was with Lur. Does that even count? But that's once more than England, France, or either Habsburg, so I can't deny it. It's in my top 4 most common adversaries at level 6. I don't find the loss condition very frightening, but both times I've gone against level 6, I've taken a spirit with at least some beast generating ability. Doesn't take much to just shut it off. I think it may be the only adversary that has a loss condition that interacts so differently depending on the spirit. Anyway, my wife would write a very different review of Russia, so I'm not sure I'm ever getting it to the table again for anything but solo. Still, it's a solid, worthy adversary. Good man. Thanks, Goose Man. So yeah, the invader minigame is just too fun. Yeah, I agree. It is. It's deplorable, but it's fun. It's super fun. It's super engaging. Every single decision matters, and I find that very interesting. I don't find the loss condition very frightening. Agree. We'll talk about the loss condition later on in terms of how hard it is. I'll pick up on that one later on when we talk about sort of how they beat us. We still haven't talked about kind of the thematic integration. I think I went past a comment where somebody talked about that on the dislike, so I suppose I'll stop and talk about that one now. In fact, actually, it was funny. As I was reading it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to pick up on that, and then I just forgot. They talked about it being thematically relevant, but not mechanically well integrated. And I believe someone else talked about the reverse. They said it was mechanically okay, but thematically awful. So there's this kind of range, let's say, of opinion there. Where do I fall on that range? Thematically, I understand the problems that somebody was raising earlier on, where they said, why are hunters scary? Why, when they kill a few deer on the island, do all of a sudden everyone lose the game? Yeah, to be honest, I don't understand that either. It's a bit silly, maybe. So the thematics, I'm not totally in love with, and the thematics in this game are flawless. For the vast majority of cases, so it's fine to say that some of the thematics aren't quite flawless, and I think this is definitely a situation that isn't quite flawless. Mechanically, then, how does it fit into the situation? So I think it's a bit at odds. It's a bit weird. It's a bit, sort of from left field. Somebody said it, I think, in one of the comments, or maybe we haven't read this one yet, but if somebody said something like, I get it, it's it just makes another danger land. It just makes yet another, situation where your single explorers are a problem. But Russia already did that in a sense, so they already made every land a problem. So it's like making some land slightly more of a problem is not, it doesn't push the loss condition vibe the same way a lot of the other spirits do. Not spirits, adversaries do. The other adversaries are like a set of rules, but then the loss condition is like this big looming scary thing. Russia, it's like this sort of very, very, infrequently scary thing, and sometimes it kills you. It's like, yeah, I'm not in love with the loss condition on Russia. I think, as I said, there's one or two things that I don't love about this and that make it my least favorite adversary. The loss condition, I wouldn't say is like a problem. It doesn't make it my least favorite adversary the same way that other silly push around stuff does. But yeah, it feels a little bit it feels like the thing they didn't quite tweak. You know what I mean? It was like that got rushed to print and they didn't have time to finalize the loss condition. That's a bit how it feels to me, and especially because it's like it doesn't do anything until level 1. That's another bit that just feels like Spirit Island doesn't have much of that. Spirit Island has very little of this kind of, oh, that feels like something they forgot. You know what I mean? There's very little that feels like it was forgotten about in this game, and that sort of feels like one of them. So anyway, that was my comments on the loss condition. Did I pick up on everything else here from Gooseman? I think we did. Yeah, I think we're good to go. Thanks, Gooseman. Good man. Fots a lot. The super aggressive explorers intimidate me, but I don't shy away from Russia. I just get ready for explorers to get on my nerves. Yeah, I can feel this one, Fatsalat. I'm the same. They do intimidate me. I do feel intimidated by Russia in a way that England doesn't intimidate me. I love England. I know England. It's like I feel at home. I feel comfortable with England. I do not feel comfortable with Russia. I feel terrified. I feel like every decision I have to think 20 times when I'm playing against this adversary. But I also don't shy away from it. Exactly like you, Fatsalat. I just get ready for them to get on my nerves. Okay, Sachio says Russia is my favorite adversary. Here we go. So we're really bringing out the big compliments now. I rather enjoy the balancing act of figuring out when you can handle the extra invader cards from the fear deck and deciding whether to bunch up explorers to wipe them out versus avoiding potential extra ravages. Yeah, love it. I particularly like how they play against control spirits. Pushing the single explorer out of a land will fix that land for an entire cycle because it won't build a ravage. But unlike Sweden, where this quickly refuses them as a threat, the explorers themselves are a mounting threat you need to deal with, and the escalations and the bonus invader cards both work to provide a critical mass of explorers which control effects don't trivialize. I think most spirits can work well into Russia so long as you're willing to adjust your strategy to match the threat. Whereas with some adversaries, like England or Prussia, for instance, even if I can win with some spirits, they feel very stymied by the adversary mechanics. Okay, lots of interesting stuff here. The balancing act stuff. Yeah, it's brilliant. It just is brilliant. It's hard and it makes you think. And like I said, it's brilliant. They particularly like how they play against control spirits, and this is really insightful. Really like this. So pushing the single explorer out of a land will fix that land for an entire cycle. Yeah, you get it out. It doesn't build. We're good to go. But unlike Sweden, where this quickly refuses the threat, this doesn't stop the threat. I mentioned it already slightly when somebody said about skips and they compared skips to Sweden. This is the same sort of thing, and I will pick up on this again later. This idea of, I'll just stop that for now. Stopping things for now against Russia is very much for now, and it's not for long. It's for now only. Again, the stage 3 start coming. Bam, explorers back in the land. Problem again. Against Sweden, if you shut down the build, we talked about this all the way back in our very first adversary episode, and we started to talk about things like tempo, I believe, in that episode. Against Sweden, it's like they explore, get the explorer out of the land, and it's like the whole problem is solved. They don't build, they don't ravage, they don't do all their, sort of various sort of ravage-based effects. Sweden are all about the ravage, of course. They've got the one where you they deal extra damage, they deal extra blight. If you deal a blight, you put stuff in extra lands, all that kind of stuff. They're all about the ravage. Russia are the exact same. If you look at this wee little Russia reminder card here, or the reminder token, let's bring it up in front of the camera there, it's all ravage. They've only got one of these tokens, ravage level 1, 3, and 6. So it's very similar to Sweden in that respect. They are very much all about the ravage. But unlike Sweden, they are not shut down by a single explorer push, not even remotely. So that's kind of all of that. I think most spirits can work well into Russia so long as you're willing to adjust your strategy to match the threat. I don't know where I land on this. So last time out with England, we talked about how so many spirits get shut down by England, and I agreed. That was kind of just, it's almost just a known fact, right? England are the worst by far adversary, the worst offender at shutting spirits down. But I think Russia are kind of bad at it too. Like, Russia force you to do certain things. And again, we'll get to how we beat them and how they beat us and all that later on. But suffice to say, if you can't beat Russia quick, so some spirits might just do this rush tactic we already heard from someone else. Beat them quick, get over the line. Okay, fair enough. If you don't beat Russia quick, you are going to be hammered. Hammered by actions and more actions and more blight and more problems. You cannot keep them at bay. They're very similar to England. You can't keep them. You can't contain them. They just go everywhere, and everything is a problem. So it's dissimilar to England in a way that England are like go tall as a big problem, and they'll just keep forcing tall. They'll force it, and you can't stop it. Russia are go wide, and they'll force go wide, and that you can't stop it. So it's similar in that respect, where it's very difficult to contain. And I'm not sure it's true to say that every spirit can just adjust your strategy to match that. But it's probably more fair to say that there are more effects in the game which will allow you to adjust. And by that, I'm probably more pointing at the minor deck than the major deck. England kind of forces a lot of spirits to go major or bust. Find the major or bust, you're dead. Russia, there's a lot of effects that can interact with them. Push a single explorer can be huge against Russia, whereas that type of small effect, zero cost card, will rarely be, huge against England. So I think that part is true here. I do kind of like that here, where most spirits can kind of find a way. You can sort of draft your way through the minor deck, and you can kind of use a bunch of small effects and sort of, build up a bunch of critical mass of actions and kind of target them that way. So I think, yeah, it's probably fair there to say that more spirits are able to play that game. But there's still plenty of spirits that can't really do that, especially the ones with very low action economy. And again, we'll talk about those later on. Now, Squire Monkey up next. I really like Russia, and I know we're going long here on the chat. As I said, guys, there's plenty of people with really good things to talk about here. So, of course, I want to respond to it. I want to respect that, and I want to get into it. So, really hope you're enjoying the benefit of what people are bringing here, because there's so many good stuff here. Squire Monkey says, I really like Russia. I consider them probably the hardest adversary for their difficulty levels, though, so I don't often play them when I'm not in the mood to really get into it. I feel like the beast thing and the additional loss condition are a bit shoehorned in. You could remove the additional loss condition without impacting the difficulty of the adversary at all. We've never come even close to them triggering it, which I generally say is a bad sign for its inclusion. So this is the one that I had in my mind earlier when I was talking about. I'll talk about it later. Yeah, I've already talked about it now, but this is where I was going to respond to it. They say Russia 2 and Russia 3 are the real meat of this adversary. Combined with the escalation, they mean your land will never be clear, and your problems can only be postponed for so long. Everything beyond that is just assistance to make sure Russia can keep the pressure up once the spirits start scaling in power. Like most adversaries, there are some spirits which are too strong against them and some which are too weak, which is a shame but unavoidable. Russia is probably the most complicated adversary mechanically, so it's not suitable for inexperienced players who still need more time to get an intuitive feel for the basics of the invader threat and card cycle. Excellent here, Squire Monkey. So yeah, the beast thing and the loss condition thing, yes, absolutely. Bit shoehorned in, totally agree. You could remove the additional loss condition and you could barely impact the difficulty of the adversary at all. Totally agree. Russia 2 and Russia 3 are the real meat of this adversary. Yeah, that's your kind of push mechanic where you push the explorers, and then the other one is the triple explorer Ravage. So yes, 100% agree. They are absolutely the meat of the adversary. After that, what do we have here? We have the thing about the inexperienced players, and yes, I couldn't agree more. This is not an adversary for inexperienced players, certainly not for your first time playing against Russia level 4, which somebody earlier on had. Yeah, it's just way too detailed and fiddly, and every small mistake and small step can absolutely destroy you. Thank you, Squire Monkey. Up next, Taste the Rainbow, short and sweet. Love it. Super fun. Lure is my favorite spirit. Well, that doesn't surprise me then if you enjoy playing against Russia. Now, Symphony 7 comes in with a big one here. No other adversary does what Russia does, and I love having such a brutal, difficult, and completely different way to play the game. And that is my feeling exactly. Russia stands completely unique as the only adversary who attacks you entirely through explorers, and what a cool fight that makes it. No longer being able to ignore a ravaging land with one explorer requires a major re-evaluation of your strategies, and the hidden invader cards in the fear deck reward carefully measuring out your fear to make sure you're getting them on the correct turns. Typically, I find you either want to slow play your fear and get the cards after you've already stabilized, or really blitz the fear deck and try to get them out of the way as quickly as possible. While the extra buff explorers lead to an extreme challenge, the fact that Russia does nothing extra with buildings also gives you opportunities to pocket, and usually means you have fewer buildings in the way of an early terror level victory. The 3 explorers rule is typically seen as a need to control. However, I've had some serious success by drafting a good blight removal card, shoving everything into one land and just removing the blight every turn. As far as strong spirits, Lure goes without saying. They practically designed him to dump on Russia. Everything he does hard counters them. Keeper is fantastic with explorer control and destruction, as well as copious wild and blight removal. Many Minds gets to essentially delete the loss condition and comes with so much fear and defense you get to blitz to terror level 2 or 3 quite quickly, where the relatively low number of buildings can allow a cheeky early win. I do like a cheeky early win. I like to go for his more top track build and draft some majors to try and actually clear out some lands after you herd them all together. Like the sound of that. And then finally, Breath of Darkness. You don't have to worry about 3 explorers in a land if they're all in the endless dark, and downgrading gets around the extra resilience Russia explorers have. Brilliant. Thank you, Symphony 7. So much here to enjoy. Speaking of enjoy, just bear with me a second here while I have a glass of beer. And doubt all my life choices as it absolutely attacks my palate with with licorice. So what have we got next? Not next, sorry. I want to go back and look at this. This is a great comment. Major reevaluation of strategies. Yeah, 100%. You've got to get your strategy right here for sure. And here they talk about this sort of duality of approaches here, where it's either you slow play your fear, you stabilize, you get the cards, the fear bombs later when you have sort of more of a scaling done, or you really try to blitz the deck. And they've given even some examples of kind of some spirits that want to do that. Many Minds being a sort of a blitz type of an approach. Breath of Darkness, I think, could probably do something similar. Keeper, it's very much about sort of control. Keeper does not do a lot of fear. It's slow, it's laborious. It's going to kind of, contain them a little bit with kind of wilds and little pings of damage and moving stuff around with the right and 8. So it's kind of 2, I think, different ends of the scale there. They talk about kind of this idea of just putting everything in one land and just keep blight removing it every turn. So it's going to keep blighting every turn, and then you just keep removing the blight. So I think that's a very real strategy. I think a couple of other people talk about it, and we will talk about that later on as well. The fact here that the Russia does nothing extra with buildings, so it actually gives you opportunities to pocket, and it gives you sort of fewer buildings, and that can potentially allow you to turn the corner to a victory as well. So huge amount of fantastic inputs here, Symphony. You've actually, to be honest with you, covered probably about half of my how to beat them later on. So really good one there. I'm very happy to kind of go through all of that. Thank you. Inconsequentialis with another bit of a decent one here. For strategy, I think the one thing you want to avoid against Russia is getting drowned in explorers. That is how you lose the game. Specifically, having them spread all over your board is the issue. The main ways to reduce explorer count is slow play the fear deck, pocket, and actually killing explorers. I don't mind throwing 3 damage on a 3 explorer land to kill 2 of them and prevent a build against Russia. Another option is to push all the explorers into a single land. This tends to work mostly if you have a blight heal or a ravage skip and can afford to play it every turn. Basically just wins the board when it happens, in my experience. Just keep in mind that 3 explorer lands ravage twice if you have 2 cards in the ravage slot. We talked about that already. Very, very important here, especially if your plan is to blight heal. Because if they ravage twice, you go blight, then you go blight cascade, and your blight heal loop doesn't work anymore. Now, lastly, I want to say that I'm disappointed in the Lure versus Russia matchup. So here we go, Inconsequentialis with the hot take. They're disappointed in the Lure versus Russia matchup. Maybe I'm just not good at it, but people make it sound trivial, and I just don't feel that way. I've had some very hard Lure versus Russia 6 games. Basically, I agree that Lure absolutely trivializes the inland in the matchup. The issue, though, is the coast, Russia bombs and bad explorers. There are some combination of these that reliably make me cry for help because I just cannot deal. Lure only has so much pull from coast in their kit. Most other adversaries add less to your coast. Most other adversaries you don't need to collect every ravaging explorer. Most other adversaries you can play softly beckon every second turn and it's fine. And against Russia, it's quite commonly not. Very spicy. Very, very spicy take. And I would definitely mention right now in Consequentialis that we had a funny video, there was a funny video put up by Greg on solo playthroughs. He did a series all the way back on, he called it a Strength versus Strength series or something, where he did at the time it was like 6 or 7 adversaries, and he did like his best pick into all of them kind of thing, where he did the counter pick or whatever, or something like that, and he did lure into Russia 6 and he lost. So he was totally gutted over that, and he was like making jokes about it on the channel every time thereafter. So you're not the only one who's lost as lure into Russia, but yeah, I've never tried this matchup in all honesty. I am very aware about how many of the abilities hard counter Russia, but yeah, I can also see that this idea of even one explorer on the coast, if you can't get rid of it, it's going to blight, and then it's potentially blight cascading if you get the back-to-back. So I can definitely understand the problems that are there for potential. Now, Iron Panzer 1, I play mainly difficulty 5 to 8, so I don't really deal with levels 5 to 6 of Russia. Levels 1 to 4 are cool, neat, and build spatial awareness with avoiding the overstacking explorers. Short and sweet, nice and easy. An Angry Beaver comes in and says, Russia levels 1 to 4 are great, I like it a lot. Russia levels 5 to 6 are utter misery, which I refuse to face again. So Angry Beaver is terribly angry. One of those beavers, one of those beasts on the island that's being hunted by the Russians, by the sounds of things. Oh dear, yeah, I refuse to face again. So that's it. They're done. Just no, I'm done. I'm never doing it again. Yeah, it's funny. Again, I talked before on the channel about how it's funny to see the difference between some people. Like for me, it's like something is utterly miserable and I got completely trounced by it. It's like, shuffle up, let's go again. I want to figure out how to get this done. Unless it's some horrific matchup like Wildfire into England or something, at which point I'm not going to jam 100 games of that. But if it's like an adversary that is like, I do that was super hard, I want to, I don't want to play it again. For me, it's like, I definitely want to play it. That's like the achievement or something, So, but anyway, like I said, it's to each their own. And Angry Beaver, I definitely understand how, the experience with Russia, I can appreciate how the experience with Russia can easily result in no chance, never doing that again. Anyway, next up, Versalia. So we've I think a handful more here. We're near the end. Russia is a great adversary because it's unique and plays very differently from other adversaries. Most spirits have a fair shot into it, except Mud, but even that is playable. It doesn't roll over without a fight, and both major and minor decks offer plenty of solutions. It greatly rewards planning ahead, and often if you find yourself in a losing scenario, it's because you put yourself there several turns ago and it wasn't obvious at the time. Playing around beast events, fear bomb flips, and back-to-backs are very rewarding if you get it right, although it can be swingy at times. Yeah, really like this. Planning ahead, absolutely. Putting yourself there several turns ago because of a decision you made, strong agree. Like I said, every single explorer push against Russia matters. Every single one. Very like HME. We'll talk about that later on. Every single positional choice you make on the board matters against Russia, and it is very rewarding if you get it right and cripplingly hard if you get it wrong. Now, Chetverty Maggie, 1, 2, 3, and I do believe that is the first time I have gotten that name correct. First time. I said it last time. I want to at least once get your name right first time. And in the season 1 finale, Maggie, I think I did it. So do let me know in the comments if I got it wrong, but I really think I might have gotten it right there. So anyway, Maggie, I really enjoy Russia. It's a great choice when I want more difficult experiences, but it's also not as strong out of the gate as some other adversaries, so you have some time to prepare for the hard part. I also enjoy the beast minigame it provides, but I'd prefer if the loss condition was more relevant as it doesn't come up often. Oh, Russia is also the only adversary that makes blight healing generally viable, which is also interesting in my opinion. And I just generally really enjoy the whole Explorer minigame. It provides this unique experience of explorers being pretty scary, and you can say that again. I also find Spirit with lots of skips to be good against Russia if you can create a land with tons of explorers. It makes the adversary easier, but not to the point where it always becomes trivial, so it's still fun. And yes, I agree with that. Like I said about the Sweden stuff, it isn't game over if you have a skip against Russia. Russia isn't perfect though. The fear bombs can be really annoying to play around, and high difficulty can be problematic with some spirits, especially when it's not a good matchup. Learning to beat Russia with vengeance was painful to say the least, and that's far from the worst Russia matchup in the game. Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, blight healing, absolutely. Skips, absolutely. They enjoy the beast minigame. I just wish it was more prevalent and more relevant. Because I don't dislike it. I just feel like it's, to be honest, I feel like the loss condition is flavor text a lot of the time. Yeah, in the games where it matters, it's super fun and interesting, but a lot of the time it just isn't. Vengeance, I could see Vengeance being a very interesting, very engaging type of game. Vengeance wants blight. They like to take blight. Russia wants you to take blight. And yeah, getting around and dealing pings of damage and things like that with vengeance can be quite relevant. So I can see that. But also, of course, Russia are putting you under a lot of pressure, and vengeance doesn't necessarily have a high action economy game. So yeah, it wants to get to the late game, but they will punish you before you get there if you wait too long. So I can see that being a super cool and interesting matchup. Thanks, Maggie. BMTC, that one little explorer can't die and just runs around terrified, getting a million steps in. It's annoying but cute. Oh, God. Oh, I love this comment. Getting a million steps in. It's annoying but cute. It is. It's annoying but cute. It is funny. The stupid little explorer running around. Oh, thank you, BMTC. I laughed at that one. I forgot how much I laughed at it until I read it again. Now, that might be the booze. I'm not going to lie. The booze might make that slightly funnier than it should be, but it's a good one. Thank you. All right. Aminar 14. Both halves of Russia are fun independently, but they do feel like two halves of separate adversaries. One that is very accelerated and a nasty deck, and one that's a really cool explorer manipulation minigame. I like to take off the accelerated deck and fuse the other half with the other rules to see what happens. And the deck acceleration goes really well with just about everything else. Yeah, I mean, is it two halves of separate adversaries? Not really. I mean, yes, something like, of course, Brandenburg Prussia is the epitome of the three up front, and then getting back to the threes very quickly. That's the sort of quintessential stage 3 experience, if you want to call it that. So you could almost liken it to that type of experience. Russia isn't quite as extreme, right? Russia obviously gives you your 3-1s no matter what. 1-1-1, then it does 2, and then 3. So you're not getting a 3 until the 5th card, and then you're kind of, going 2-3, 2-3. It's not quite that it's the insane acceleration at the beginning of the game. Like even something like Habsburg, they accelerate one stage 1 card away. There's another adversary, I think, that does that, isn't there? Does Sweden do that as well? I think Sweden. Oh God, I can't remember now. I couldn't be certain. But that kind of accelerating the stage 1s away is very. That's almost like a speed boost for the adversary early. Russia, it's not quite the same. it's not the acceleration. We talked about this already, where sort of one person was saying they force you down the accelerated route to try kill them before they come online. So the deck itself is not. It's not that it's so accelerated early. It's that it's so accelerated mid game. It's the middle of the game where they accelerate the pace on you, and those threes start coming in, which is just, again, as I said, it's just nasty. I mean, the word nasty here is to say the least. It's horrifying. But again, I think it just fits well here. It doesn't feel like two halves of separate adversaries to me. Yes, you could take that 1-1, 2-3, 2-3, and you could just kind of tack it onto any of the other adversaries or whatever. It is a kind of a, let's call it a generic type of effect that could work against almost anybody else. But in the way that it works against Russia, it's the single explorers. That's where it just fits so perfectly in the dynamic. And by perfectly, I mean absolutely disgustingly. Where again, it's that I cleared the land and then I put one explorer back in, and all my hard work was undone. So challenging, but just so well designed. I think it fits amazingly well. I think the whole thing is coherent to a T, except for the loss condition. And yeah, that's kind of, not really too much more to say about that. But thank you, Aminar. Animar is the word that came to my mind there. Animar, soul of something or other in a Magic the Gathering card is what comes to my mind when I saw your name. Anyway, Magic the Gathering. We're not going to get into it today, hopefully. I don't have any plans to talk about Magic today. Look, we may well talk about it before the end of the episode. I at least have to mention it once every single time, don't I? But I think that's going to be it for today. Now, this is going to be our last comment. We're 2 hours into the episode and we still haven't gotten through the bloody community inputs yet. But we're nearly there. We're just at the end. See no harm. And we left the doozy for the end. I really like Russia. It is a bit fiddly and it is doing different things, so it's not as straightforward as the original three. But I feel like those things come together into something I like, keeping the players under pressure. The 2 damage explorers and the 3 explorers rule can cause things to go bad for the spirits very fast. The moving explorers also make it hard for the adversary to be kept down, but control strategies will work for trying to prevent Bill's ravages and gives isolates an added value, which nobody else mentioned so far. Sweden also adds extra damage, but is really easy because you can just get ahead of Sweden. That's the other part that Russia brings in. It punishes the players if they try to get too far ahead. The invader cards in the fear deck means that fear rushing will get the invaders to start accelerating faster than the player can deal with. The Russia 6 means you just can't stop all ravages to be safe. I like the weaving of the 2s and the 3s at the end, as it is keeping the pressure steady, which fits with this. The way the escalation works also has the 2s to be a bit more controlled but concentrated, because it depends on beasts and not land types. So that's quite interesting as well. It sort of, forces the things into certain lands that aren't terrain specific. Now, second page. I think the fiddliness is also pretty easy to handle, as most of it happens during setup and the rest all deals with the Ravage step. This is different from, say, HME, where there are many times you have to remember things. The only thing that feels weird is the beast interaction, particularly the loss condition. I kind of get it, because it can create another place where ravages aren't safe. It being a token means there are ways to move this around and control things, and it can be unpredictable with the event deck. I don't think that fully works, however, mostly because how much the spirits can interact with beasts varies so much. If powers can use beasts well, then the loss condition is basically not there and can even be used against Russia. If the spirit doesn't use beasts and doesn't get drafts for it, it could be fine, or it could be really bad, depending too much on the event deck. I don't hate it, but I don't like it. One extra bit of fun that I do is I track the first surviving explorer and see how many times he runs and how many times I can make an explorer run in one phase. My records are 30 and 12. So Xenoham tracks the explorers running around 30 times. He had one explorer running around in one game and 12 times in one phase. This is the stupid thing I talked about, where you ping the explorer all the way across the map and back across the map and generate loads of fear. hilarious. I love that last bit. That last bit made me laugh so much. It's so funny. So look, yeah, I mean, look, I agree with most of what you said here. I disagree that the fiddliness is pretty easy to handle, and as most of it happens during setup, and the rest deals with the Ravage step. This bloody adversary is fiddly as hell. All the moving around stuff, the stuff that happens in the events, checking the quirky to check the rules, all of that kind of stuff. It's very fiddly. I can't agree that it's pretty easy to handle. I think it's fiddly. I don't mind it too much because, as I say, strategically, I don't mind how all that works together. But it's definitely fiddly. Anyway, see no harm. Everybody else, it's been a full season of magnificent inputs and a huge thank you to all of you. There were so many names there that have been down and in and around the place. Nora, Adrenaline, Gooseman is a gamer. Not Brandon Jaspers, Inconsequentialis, Dark Dirigible Titan. There's so many names that come to my mind, and Beta Jin, 100 others who I haven't mentioned. Thank you so much to all of you for being involved and, being part of the show and providing your inputs. Despite the fact that every week I come in here and I generally tear some of them to shreds, as I've said so many times in the past, that is not for any reason other than to have a good conversation. I do not have a person here in the room with me that I can talk to, and as I said right back in episode 0, I hugely rely on all of you to be the person I can talk with and bounce off and, have ideas with. And again, reiterating and sort of repeating myself from in the past, this isn't about I'm right, you're wrong. Of course it's not, right? This is a game full of opinions. And when I talk about do I agree with you or do I not, that doesn't mean you're wrong and I'm right or vice versa. It's about opinions, and it's about sort of conversation. And there's lots of stuff in there that I may have said I've disagreed with. That doesn't mean I'm right. It's about personal preference, and other people have preferences that I don't have, and it's amazing, and I love that. And this game is full of preference and personality and things that matter to people. I identify with this game. I sort of live vicariously through this game, if I could put it that ridiculously. But like, these things matter to me. How I sort of choose to approach and play and grow and build out these spirits and interact with this game is a very personal thing. And of course, it's very personal for all of you. And the whole point of this podcast and these sections with the community interaction was to give all of that life. Give everybody's opinions life, so that it's not just me sitting in here giving my own opinion. That would be boring. I never wanted to do that, and I'm really glad that everybody was so willing to give their own thoughts and feelings and personal experiences, because that is how this thing was able to live and breathe. So a huge thank you to everybody during season 1 that did all of that. You have made my life so much richer and more enjoyable and easier. If you didn't do all of that, I would have been here on my own, and it would have been so much harder. Now, the episodes would have been shorter, so there's always that as well. But again, huge thank you to you all. Now, we're 2 hours and 7 minutes in. I'm going to have a sip of beer. I'm not going to lie, that beer's going to my head a little bit. You might have heard it in my tone. I'm not sober anymore. Not drunk either, but I'm not sober. So we're going to get into strategy now, and we'll see how the head holds up. I intended to come and enjoy myself in this last episode, and I'm thoroughly enjoying myself so far. Let's see how all this goes. Now, first, how do they beat us is the question. Again, as before, 2 little sections within here. First of all, how do they attack us? And then sort of how do we lose the game? 2 slightly different things here, different approaches to this. So first of all, how do they attack us? 3 things, right? We talked about the golden rule before. Obviously, first and foremost, they attack us with explorers, right? It's clear. All the way back at the start of the episode, we started out with, that escalation doesn't sound too bad. That's only adding 2 explorers. Yes, they attack us with explorers. Front and center. Ignore everything else in the game until you've dealt with the explorers, because they suck. If you've got 2 damage in the land and there's a town versus 2 explorers, the explorers are your problem. Always against this adversary. They deal extra damage. They're impossible to kill. They get added by God knows how many rules on the spirit panel as well as throughout the game. They create multiple ravages. Like, everything they do is a nightmare. They're the problem. So just discount everything else. Now, of course, we'll talk about the fear rushing and all that separately. So at some point, you just kind of maybe have to ignore them. But ignoring the Russia explorers in the game too early is going to cause you big problems. That is how they attack you, first and foremost. Second, they have, and I've already alluded to this earlier, I'm picking it up now, they have an extremely high action economy. Extremely high. The highest of all of the adversaries, I venture. Yes, we talked already about how early Brandenburg Prussia come out. Brandenburg Prussia are the other sort of action economy adversary. They come out earlier. They hit you harder earlier. But Brandenburg Prussia, the inevitability they have on action economy is unmatched. It's horrific. The early and often stage 3 cards. The back-to-backs. The fear bombs, adding extra actions. The extra ravages from the triple explorers. They even get extra explorers. I'll put that in brackets, quote unquote, extra explorers, because every time you destroy, you fear destroy an explorer and you push it into an empty land, it's like a brand new explorer action, just put an explorer in there. They are just actions coming out of their ears. You can't keep them back. This is what I talked about before. England are inevitability, just an insurmountable force that will push through on the y-axis, if I can use that kind of term. They're up, they're high, they're going tall, they're going up. Russia are the same, except on the x-axis, they're on the go wide. They will force you through whatever you have in terms of pocketing and isolation and all the rest of it. They will find a way through. It's just actions, and if you have not fear rushed them early, you will have to face those actions and the consequences of your decisions later on in the game. So that is the second way they attack you. The third way, we heard a couple of people mention this, it's they hurt you for doing well. Do you stop the ravages? Okay, enjoy your Russia 6. Absolutely awful. Did you group your invaders and do you have empty lands? Okay, now you've got the Russia 3, which is the extra ravages from the multiple explorers. Did you do well on your fear? Enjoy your fear bomb. It's just this. What's the word that somebody used? I think it was Beta Jin came up with this term, or it would first use this term all the way back. It was the not elasticity. How did they call that? Rubber banding, where you kind of get you push them back and you get ahead of them and you sort of beat them down and you progress well against the adversary and they find a way back in. Russia will find a way back in, and if you do too well against them and do not think about that later game, if you focus your attention early, you will get hammered in the mid to late game. And we'll come back on that in terms of scaling now momentarily. They hurt you for doing well. That's the third thing. Now, how do we lose the game? Again, golden rule. 3 ways we lose the game. First, and here for me, you have 2 kind of joint ways you lose the game to Russia. And then there's like a third way. Against England, we talked about if you're playing at level 6, you've kind of got 2 ways, and then if you're not playing level 6, it's less relevant. For me here, as long as you're playing at your level, at your level being skill, experience, that kind of thing. If you're playing Russia at the level that matches to your ability, this is going to be relevant for you, no matter what that is. If it's level 1 or level 6. I think these kind of 3 things will more or less apply in the same way, should I say. So first, how do we lose? They have too many invader actions / we lose control of the board. Right, so again, we talked in the previous thing about the high action economy. They just take so many actions. We just lose control of the board. There's stuff everywhere. We just don't have enough actions. One of the main ways is something that's one of the commenters mentioned towards the end there, was making mistakes early in the game and then having this kind of effect come into play 2-3 turns later. This is what I'm talking about here. Mistakes when pushing your explorers is one of the main reasons that I'm talking about in losing to this kind of type of loss, where they just have too much going on. You lose control of the board. You can't get it back. I pushed invaders into the wrong place. Not only I pushed it into the wrong place, but I made a decision and I just got unlucky. And I think again here, with one of the commenters earlier on mentioned about bad luck event, edge cases. 100% agree. Russia can wreck you. Russia force you to make decisions. And I talk about my playthrough. I'll talk about it later on, but there was so many moments in that game where I had to make decisions when I was pushing explorers. What do I lose to here? Fear bombs coming up. I'm going to empty some lands, but that means I'm going to put double explorers in other lands, and that next explorer card could wreck me. So, losing control of the board doesn't necessarily mean you made a mistake when pushing explorers. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Everything with this adversary is on a bloody knife edge. And if you just get unlucky, or you just push into the wrong land, or you get the wrong fear bomb, or you get the wrong event, it can all just fall apart. And that's what this looks like. Second way, which is in joint first place. So that is one way you lose, and it's a frequent way. The next way is another frequent way. Too much blight. It's a Ravage adversary. We talked about it already. Levels 1, level 3, level 6. Adversary hammers you in the Ravages. The triple explore lands. Russia 6, forcing you to take blight or else take the extra explorer and the town. This adversary just pours blight on you. If you race fear, if you decide that that's the route that you're going and you're just going to ignore the board and you're just going to rush fear as much as you can, you're just going to take a bunch of blight. So, this sort of too much blight, this is like a blight loss condition, let's say, but ultimately here what we're talking about is this is a slightly different way than level 1. Level 1 is more, I tried to play to the board, I tried to control things, I played a bit more of a longer game, and I got overwhelmed by the number of actions. I lost control, and yes, maybe I lost the blight. Second way is more, I was probably rushing fear, or I was like, there was like a triple explorer land that maybe got out of my control, and I tried to kind of let it go for a while, and I just took too much blight, and then I couldn't get it back, type of thing. But slightly different. They ultimately maybe both end up with losing to blight. Ultimately, that's probably the way you lose, but slightly different approaches to the game. Now, there are your two very frequent ways to lose to Russia. Your big gap back is the loss condition. I'm not saying you'll never lose to the loss condition. And I checked my notes, and I have lost to the loss condition with Russia. So it has happened to me once, I think. But generally speaking, as I talked about, it is often flavor text. Far more often than not. 90% of the time, whatever it's going to be flavor text. If you lost to the loss condition against Russia, the chances are you were not in control of your game and you were probably already going to lose. So that's one thing I would say about the loss condition here is, yes, they got you with the loss condition. Sometimes this means you maybe took, too early Ravages on your, 2 of your 4 beasts. You took blight to scale. And actually, I did this in my playthrough. I did the very first Ravage that came up in a wetland, I think. I took one of my lost condition blight, one of my lost condition beasts. I just allowed it. I took the blight to scale, if you want to use that term. I could have stopped it, but I didn't. in some games, you might do that once, you might do that twice, and you've got 2 more left on the board, and you go, you know what, I'm scaling now, I'm building my kind of, my action economy, and I'll be fine. I won't take any more. And then all of a sudden an event comes and you lose two beasts, and there's nothing you can do about it. Or you lose 1 beast, and there's nothing you can do about it. And now all of a sudden you've lost 2, and there's only 1 left in the island. You lose to the last condition. It does happen. So that sometimes happens. But generally speaking, more often than not, it'll be you just weren't in control. It was maybe slightly later in the game, stuff's kind of falling apart. You didn't find any beast ad cards. You're not a beast spirit, and you were just sort of out of the game. You just kind of got overwhelmed, and you lost to the lost condition. But to be honest, you were probably pretty close to losing to one of those other 2 lost conditions I talked about. So that is kind of all of that. That is how we lose. Now, the big moment, how do we beat them? Enough negativity. We've heard how we lost. We've heard about losing to these enough now. I've lost to these plenty, by the way. Especially, as I say, in combinations. This adversary is a joke in combinations. It's horrendous. But anyway, as I say, that is for a different day. Enough negativity. How do we beat them? So, I talked about the fear deck analysis, and I'm going to do a little section on the fear deck now. We're going long, so, like previous sections, as we've gotten to these kind of deep dive stuff, I've gone, you know what, maybe I shouldn't dive so deep after all. But we will we'll spend a little bit of time doing this. So I'm going to start here. We will do this very good to very bad stuff or whatever, now kind of, pretty shortly. But I'm going to start off and I'm going to do the fear deck analysis before I get into all that, so I don't kind of, disrupt it in the middle. The fear deck. We've already heard clearly here, fear is a very relevant type of mechanic when it comes to Russia. So let's have a little look at what the fear deck looks like, what's in the deck, and what are the kind of, relevant things of note. Some of it is kind of land types, some of it is sort of action types and all that. So we'll get into all of it. There are 50 cards in the event deck, first of all, right? 50. And I've sort of broken these up into 3 categories. Removal, which is 25 of the 50. So 25 of the 50 cards remove invaders in some way. And by remove, I mean remove them from a land. They don't necessarily remove them from the island. They remove them from a land. We'll get into that and we'll break it down now. So 25, half is removal. Defensive actions, 18 out of 50. And then skip actions, which is 7 out of 50. So if I give a percentage here, breakdown, removal, 50% of the deck. Defense, 36% of the deck. And then skip actions, 14% of the deck. Skip actions being everything that isn't removal or defensive, essentially. So let's go through them one by one. Each of them then, so that's kind of 3 categories. And then within each of these, there's kind of, I've broken that down into sort of 6 total subcategories. So within the removal category, I've got 3 sort of subcategories here, right? So, and again, like I did with, I think, the France episode where I did the event analysis, sometimes there's some overlap within these categories, but I've kind of just picked one category for each to fall into. There is no overlap being calculated here or counted. Let's say if I had something in one category, it obviously isn't counted in the other. So that's fine. So removal, 25 cards. Let's have a look at the first thing. The first thing is removal where Dahan is a relevant piece within the effect. This is 9 of the 25 cards. So 9 of the total 50 cards are going to remove pieces when they're in lands with Dahan. So Dahan is a very key kind of theme when it comes to fear cards here. So 9 of the cards are going to remove invaders if they're in lands with Dahan. Now, within this, I've noted that there is 1 land that cares about coastal, and there are 3 cards that care about tokens. So that would be generally remove from a land with Dahan or tokens. And tokens is kind of a recurring theme here across a bunch of these kind of categories. So there are 3 of them that matter here. Let's take one example. For example, the one that coastal. Where's the coastal land? So I think it's Dahan Reclaimed Fishing Grounds. level 1. And again, of course, also I should note here that each of these cards have slightly different effects at level 1, 2, and 3. I was never going to do this big deep dive where I went into everything because it would be far too much detail. But just to give you one example here, Dahan Reclaim Fishing Grounds. Each player chooses a different coastal land with Dahan, in each 1 damage per Dahan. And then there's, the later effects let you gather first and then deal damage. So that's that's that kind of coastal card I talked about here. When we talk about tokens, for example, here, one example could be flee from dangerous lands. On each board, push an explorer or town from a land with badlands, wilds, or Dahan. And in this case here, you can see that when I talk about removal, I'm talking about removing it from the land with Dahan. You're not actually removing it, you're only pushing it. But that's kind of how that all works. And there's some other stuff in here, that let you kind of do Dahan attack. Each player chooses a different land with Dahan at level 2, 1 damage per Dahan. So, we know this, that kind of, the fear cards will often help us if they're in lands with Dahan. So I wanted to get a little bit of a count on that. And by my count, there are 9 cards that will help us if we have invaders in the lands with Dahan from a removal perspective. Okay, that's the first category. Next category up then is going to be still within the removal category. It's going to be the sort of remove, destroy, replace type effects that aren't related to Dahan. 10 of these cards. So there were 9 of the first one. There's now going to be 10 of these. And again, if I sort of give you a little bit of a breakdown of some of the key kind of themes, coastal comes up again once. Inland comes up once. Presence comes up once. So you need to be thinking about your land, your invaders in lands with your presence. And then tokens come up twice again here. So let's give it 1 or 2 little examples here. So where's the one with presence? What does that look like as a matter of interest? Fear of the unseen. Level 1, each player removes an explorer or a town from a land with a sacred site. And then level 2 just upgrades that to just be a single presence instead of a sacred site. So there you're kind of thinking about, it's one of them where you're doing your growth phase and you're thinking like, how many cards in the game care about me being in the land with the invaders? From a fear perspective, it's not that many. This is 1, and we're going to look at 2 more later, but there's also events that do it as well. So it's something to be aware of here. I just wanted to kind of give people an idea about a count on how many of these matter. When we talk about things like coastal and inland, I think they're just the kind of reverse of this, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, wary the interior. Will do, they do the exact same as opposites of each other. So level 1, each player removes an explorer from an inland land. Level 2 lets you do an explorer or a town. And then the other opposite of that is emigration accelerates, which does the exact same thing except from a coastal land. So that's kind of that. And then you've got some token stuff going on again, of course, because that's a kind of a repeating theme here. Let's give one example. Too many monsters. Level 1, each player removes an explorer or a town from a land with beasts. And we should all, at this point in the game, be quite familiar with putting explorers into land with beasts and hoping for the best, because there's plenty of events that do that as well. Now, level 3. Sorry, not level 3, category 3. We're still within removal here. This is the third kind of subcategory under removal, and then we're done with this one. This is 6 cards, so the final 6 of the 25. And this is the kind of the last push and gather effects. So we talked about the Dahan stuff, then we talked about the remove and the destroy and the replace, and now we talk about the push and the gather. It's 6 cards. One of them cares about the inland. That is going to be, which one is it here? It's retreat, and it says level 1, each player may push up to 2 explorers from an inland land. Level 2 is each player may push up to 3 explorers / towns from an inland land. That can be a really powerful one, actually. So that's your kind of inland card there. There's 1 or 2 other ones here. There is plan for departure, which is related to coastal, but it says you may gather a town into a coastal land. So in this case, I didn't count it because it's not solving a coastal land. You're pulling it from a different land, and the other land can be either coastal or inland. So I didn't count it as part of all of that. But this is kind of just actually. I've counted one of my cards incorrectly here. I've caught it on the fly. Distracted by local troubles. I have it in my hand here, but this is wrong. On each board, in a land matching a Ravage card, 1 damage. So this is actually a damage card, and this should be in the in the previous category. So yeah, I've had a nightmare. I've had a nightmare. Distracted by local trouble. No, yeah, distracted by local troubles. That should be in the second category. So we should be talking about 9, 11, and 5 rather than 9, 10, and 6 there. So that's how all that shakes out. Now, next category is defense. Defensive actions. 18 total cards. Again, subcategories. There are 2 of them, and I'm going to start with Dahan. So the Dahan effects here is going to be 6. And I was actually a little bit surprised by this. So of our defensive actions here, it's a 6 versus a 12 when we talk about Dahan versus non-Dahan. And of the Dahan effects here, there are 1 total cards that care about tokens. So we talked about before this in a land with Dahan or Badlands or whatever. So in this case here, there is 1 of them and it's Panic. And it says each player adds a strife in a land with a beast, a disease, or a Dahan. That's level 1. And then, obviously it improves from there. So these are all kind of cards that give you defensive actions in lands with Dahan. Tread Carefully is actually a skip effect, but I counted it in this category because it's a kind of a defensive skip as opposed to a skipping like an Explorer or a Build or whatever like that. So this is the one that lets you, skip in a land with Dahan or adjacent to at least 5 Dahan. There's some other stuff in here. Then there's a bunch of strife ads in here. Well, actually, there's 1 strife ad in this particular category. No, there's 2. Panic we already talked about. Dahan Threaten, level 1. Each player adds a strife in a land with Dahan. There are plenty of other strife ones, but actually they come in the other subcategory. So here there's some other stuff like in each choose a different land with Dahan and each defend 2, that type of thing, and defend 1 per Dahan. Dahan on their guard is a famous one as well. That's a very nice one, gotten me out of plenty of sticky situations. Now, defense. So the other subcategory of defense then is 12 total cards here, and this is your kind of strife or defend actions that aren't necessarily linked to Dahan. And in hindsight, now that I look at this, it shouldn't be too surprising for me that these are much more prevalent than the Dahan ones. Because if it was reversed and we had way more cards linked to Dahan, that would just be too strong. That would just be too good for the player. Because then you just always push Dahan into lands, and you'd be much more likely for that to work. Whereas now, when it's a kind of a 6 to 12, so that's a kind of a 1 to 2 ratio, you're less likely for the pushing Dahan into the space to pay off, which is good. That's good game design, obviously. So it doesn't just reward you all the time for doing the thing that works better for the player. So anyway, what do we have in here? So just a couple of notes in here. So here's 2 more. So I talked before about the presence. Here are 2 more cards that care about your presence being in the land. So let's pick out those and talk about those because those ones are good. Here, Belief Takes Root. Level 1, defend 2 in all lands with presence. I believe that matches to a minor power. I actually had it in my playthrough. I can picture it perfectly, but I can't remember what it's called. So that's fine. I'll bring it up on screen if I think of it. And then you have it levels up to defend 2 in all lands, but then you gain energy per kind of sacred site that you have in lands with invaders. So that's quite a nice one when you hit it. And then the other one is Theological Strife. So this is where you add strife in lands with presence at level 1, and then similarly you start gaining energy per sacred sites as well. In higher levels, so that's all good. What else do we have here? We've got 2 more token ones. So similarly, beset by many troubles in each land with basically any of the token types. Defend 3, and there's another one there where you can add strife in a land with or adjacent to beasts. Panic by wild beasts, and then finally there's 1 more coastal card in here, which is going to be, which one is it? Overseas trade seems safer. Level 1, defend 3 in all coastal lands. Level 2, defend 6 in all coastal lands, and invaders do not build cities in coastal lands this turn. And then the level 3 is defend 9 in all coastal lands. And that one can come in quite handy. That's the last one that cares about coastal or inland. And I should point out here at this point that there are, across all of the 50 cards, 3 cards that kind of save you, if I can use the term, in coastal. And there are 2 cards that save you on inland, which I thought was quite interesting. it felt like the way this game is designed that there should be 3 and 3, and I hope I haven't missed one. So call me out in the comments if I'm wrong there. If it is 3 and 3, do call me out there. But I do believe, based on my checks, that should be 3 coastal and 2 inland. But yeah, so this is basically a whole bunch of stuff where you can, sometimes it's defending, so that'll help you in a Ravage. Other times it's like, for example, Nerves Fray here, level 1. Each player adds a strife in a land not matching a Ravage card. So these are still defensive actions, but they don't necessarily solve the Ravage. So there are some of them in there as well. So I kind of just lump them all in under that 12. Now, finally, we'll close out this little section here with the last thing, and it's skip actions. There are 7 total cards here, as I mentioned, and these are the skip actions that aren't necessarily defensive. There are 3 build action skips, there are 2 explore action skips, and there are 2 isolate effects in here. And the isolates are quite nice. They do come up. I do find myself hoping that, for them quite a bit. So supply chains abandoned is 1 on each board. Isolate a land. And then spreading to timidity, then level 1, each player chooses a land to isolate. So it's slightly more powerful because you can do them both on the same board. And then this, some of these other ones are quite famous. Then you've got kind of immigration slows. That's the one that kind of skips during the next normal build, the lowest numbered land. But then when you get to level 2, it skips the whole build, but the card kind of stays in place. I talked about that earlier in the episode, where sometimes you'll have the build is skipped and then therefore the kind of Ravage gets skipped for a turn type of thing. So that's where kind of those land. So the 7 total of those cards. So that is the breakdown. That's the kind of fear situation. That is generally what all of those kind of look like there. So as I say, I never really did that before myself to give myself a general idea about what the fear deck looks like. I just kind of have it in my mind often that there are some effects I play around, but it's nice to know the kind of prevalence of those as well. So hopefully that was helpful for some of you. Now, let me stop. Before I get into all of this, how do we beat them stuff? I'm pouring my last glass of beer. I'm a terrible man. That's essentially a bottle of wine down there. And if I get to the end of this episode, having drank that and I'm still coherent, you're going to have to, that's worth a subscribe. If nothing else, that's worth a like and subscribe. Oh, dearie me. Well, this is what being Irish is all about, I'm afraid. But anyway, that's the stereotypes I should not be perpetuating. Anyway, now, very good. So we've got, again, we talked about it before, we've got the very good to kind of very, very bad sort of scale of things. Although we do not have any very bads in this. I can definitely spoil that in advance, but we have got very goods. So starting off, very goods. I talked about it already. I'm going to reiterate the point here. Action economy is key. It's king here. Russia are just action economy experts. So I've got a couple of things here that are kind of advice around what to do from an action economy perspective. The notes I have taken here are far more relevant when we talk about this slower play kind of, meet them in the mid and late game type of thing. Yes, there is a way to rush fear with Russia. It's a valid strategy. Okay, what I'm talking about in this particular section here is not really very much on the rush fear stuff. It's on the other stuff. Okay, so if you're planning on going late, do not get dragged into a battle too early. Take Blight to scale, right? So we talked about it in the Habsburg episode. We talked about it again in the England episode, and I'm also about to talk about it here again. Take Blight to scale. Russia wants you to Blight anyway, so we're already playing into that thing. So take Blight to scale so that you can go and build out your action economy. Action economy, generally, again, all the way back in the Brandenburg-Prussia episode, I'll probably link it up here, why not? That's where I go into what action economy is and how it works and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but, a lot of it is related to card plays, how you hit your innates, all this kind of stuff. So how many actions you have to dedicate to dealing with what the invader is doing, the adversary is doing. So here you need to find a way to kind of build that out. So I already mentioned scale wide, don't scale tall. We're not going for big, heavy hitting majors in single lands. We're going for as many actions into as many lands as possible. So wide, not tall. And here is a key sort of sentence, which I'm going to credit Lonk for from the Discord server. I saw them write this quite recently, and I thought it was great. Build an engine. That is the key. The core of how to beat Russia is build an engine that can beat them. Now, an engine can look like a lot of different things. An engine can be a reclaim loop. It will often look like a reclaim loop. And my playthrough with Heart Vigil was very much an engine on a reclaim loop. But it doesn't have to be. An engine can look like blight removal on tap from Starlight with your water and 8. Not a reclaim loop, but I'm doing it every turn. An engine can look like skips, where I reclaim 1 every turn, and I reclaim my 1 skip card, and I skip that big horror show land once every turn. It can look like repetitive damage, dealing damage all the time. I have an engine going where I'm dealing damage and I'm scaling my innate and I'm dealing more damage and I'm getting across the board. It can look like control. It can look like fear racing. It can be Breath of Darkness. I'm racing. I have an engine. I'm building that engine. I'm building that bam, 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 absorb a whole, not absorb, abduct a whole bunch of invaders, get them in there, second and 8, right and 8, bam, bam, both levels, 8 fear. It's an engine. Maybe it's not a reclaim loop. Maybe I'm not playing to the board. It's not an engine that beats them on the board. Okay, I did say this section was more around not fear racing and more playing to the board, but you get the idea here. Engines can take shape in lots of different ways, but you need to have an eye on what your engine is. And this is that thing that people talked about earlier in the episode. It's the strategy. You need to adapt your strategy to Russia. You cannot hope to just beat them with bits and pieces of stuff. You have to have a plan. Either you're going under them or you're going over them. Meeting them in the middle kind of isn't an option. And that's kind of all of that. Last thing here in terms of action economy. Turn 4 is the key turn with Russia. Let's remind ourselves of the invader deck. 1, 1, 1, 2, 3. 1 and 1, the 2 1s are essentially on the first turn because 1 is your openly explore and the other 1 is on the first turn. So that's 1, 1, that's your first turn. 1 more 1 is your second turn. 2 is your third turn. And stage 3 is your fourth turn. So turn 4 is where you hit your first stage 3 card. It's also generally, give or take, in and around the same time of the game where you're going to start hitting your bomb as well, your fear bomb, your first fear bomb. So by the time you hit turn 4, you need to be well on your way to having your engine in place and online. And if you don't, you will be smothered. That is all of that. That is the key to beating Russia. Now, next. Very good. Over here. Manage the explorers. Many people would see this as the first sort of step in the process. These are joint first for me. It's the engine as well as the manage the explorers. You can control them, you can damage them. Sort of doesn't matter in a way. They're both kind of the same thing. Damage generally tends to be slightly more expensive and slightly slower. Control, slightly cheaper, slightly faster. Generally control, a little bit easier. Again, it will depend on how you are approaching the game. In some cases, you don't want to generate fear. And you heard me talk in my playthrough about, okay, I'd rather just get him out of there. I don't want to play my fear card right now because I'm actually delaying things. I'm slowing things down. I don't want fear right now. So in those kind of situations, control will be better than the damage push. Now, managing the explorers, that's moving them. Destroy all is key here. It's absolutely key. Poison Dew. I found it in my playthrough and I actually never played the card. So I found it early and I was super happy and I never even ended up casting it because I went into this kind of reclaim loop build with Heart Vigil, which we'll talk about after. But it is a super powerful card against Russia. There's plenty of others. Scour the Land, very similar. There's loads of other effects that deal like 1 damage to all. Raging Storm, one example from Lightning Swift Strike, which is not a good adversary against Russia. We'll talk about that later on as well, but that's one example of a card that is good against Russia. That's your destroy all. Even better than that is prevent, explore actions. So what we talked about, remember, Habsburg Livestock episode, I absolutely drilled home in the most uncertain terms every single town that you can prevent getting added to the board is huge. Huge. Because they move around, they get pulled in with the migrating explorers. Then, you know, when they're adjacent, they cause +2 with the damage, all this kind of stuff. Russia is very, very similar. Every single explorer that you can prevent getting added to the board is similarly huge. And this is not the case with basically any other adversary. France, yes, a little bit as well, but not even to the same extent with Russia. Russia, any explorer on the board is a problem. Every single one of them is a problem. If you can prevent explore actions, it's massive. Multiple people talked about it during the episode. Pocketing. They have fewer buildings than everybody else, so take advantage of it. Get your pocket going if you can. Now, of course, some adversary or some spirits can, some spirits can't. That's fine. If you can, pocketing is fantastic against Russia. Isolate. One other person mentioned the word isolate in here, and I'll mention it now. Of course, isolate very good for preventing explorers. It also has an added effect here for Russia of killing explorers. How does this work? Russia 2, the wording is when you would kill an explorer, one of them is instead pushed if possible. So there's an if possible there. If you've isolated the land, or technically adjacent lands, if you've essentially made it not possible to push the explorer out of that land, the explorer dies. You don't generate the fear, you basically ignore Russia 2, and you just kill all the explorers in the land. So isolate can also kind of double function on that way, and I think it came up once in my game, because Heart Vigil has a unique that does it. So isolate can be strong into Russia. Not amazing in the same way as it maybe is against, you know, Habsburg or England, but it can be good here as well. And wilds. This is like the matchup for wilds. Wilds are amazing against Russia, and of course that's one of the main reasons why Keeper. Multiple people talked about Keeper, I think, already. It's just fantastic because every single wilds matters in here in ways that it just doesn't matter in some of the other adversaries. So really, really good. Now that's managing the explorers. Very good. We're still on the very good train here. Manage your island board and your individual lands. So it's a little bit of an extension of the previous point here. So this is very similar to HME. HME, I talked about, you're always watching, you're always predicting, you're always thinking, you're always hedging. Where's my one land? Where's my lands that have 0, 1, 2, 3? Remember this, where we kind of talked about the kind of count of each of the lands and how you sort of manage. I'm going to push that one up to 3. I'll put that one down to 0. All this kind of stuff. Very, very similar here. And there's a huge tension here. There's even way more of a tension with this adversary than there is with HME. Because putting lands up to 2 explorers is scary as hell against Russia. But you often have to do it. Because your terrains, you really have to monitor your terrains here. When you're approaching the fear bombs, you can't have explorers everywhere. Someone mentioned this in the comments earlier on. When you put explorers everywhere, this adversary will destroy you. They'll just bury you. You have to hedge your bets. I mentioned, I think, in the playthrough, you need to pick your spots and have a strong risk assessment. This is a skill. It's very difficult, and it really only comes with experience. This isn't something you can kind of teach in a couple of kind of golden rules, 3 bullet points or whatever. This is just something that you only really get from experience over many games of playing Spirit Island. It's sort of trial and error almost, and just kind of seeing how things go. But against Russia, you'll end up in a lot of these spots where you have to just guess almost. Somebody talked about the randomization as well, how RNG plays a big factor with this adversary, and it's true. There will be many spots where you just need to guess. You just need to go, okay, I've got like 2 wetlands empty. This came up in my game. I'll just give you a concrete example because it's exactly what came up in my game. I had a choice between 3 wetlands to make 3 wetlands empty. I was about to do the fear bomb, so I had to choose. Do I make? I have 3 wetland. I've let's say 2 wetlands empty right now, and I'm about to push an explorer before the card flips, and I have to choose. I can choose to leave my. I had 3 wetlands empty. I'm all over the place here. I had 3 wetlands empty, and I had to choose: do I push one of this explorer now into one of my wetlands, so that I only keep 2 empty wetlands, but in doing so, I keep one of my mountains clear. And it was kind of this decision where I'm like, which one of these effects hurts me worse? If I push into the mountains, I leave 3 wetlands empty, and then I just kind of own the fear bomb. The fear bomb almost doesn't matter if it hits wetlands. But if I miss on wetlands, what's the kind of impact? And you kind of get into this risk assessment sort of situation where sometimes you go, I might want a 50-50. I might want to keep 2 of them free and 2 of them free kind of thing, and I'll sort of hedge my bets. Or other spots you're like, I'm so far behind in this game right now that I need to get lucky. I have to get lucky, and I have to hope that it's wetlands. So I'm going to push that into the mountains. I'm going to leave 3 empty wetlands, and I'll just if I get lucky, it gets me back in the game type of thing. So again, it's this kind of risk assessment situation where not every game is going to be the same thing. There isn't a hard and fast rule about how to do this, which is why Russia is so hard. You have to have this kind of constant monitoring of, is it better right now for me to push that in and make 2 explorers in that land, risking that straight stage 3 card puts it in and goes up to 3? Or is it better for me to push and spread and make 1 in 2 different lands? But then I'm more likely for that to be a problem next turn as well anyway. So you've got all these kind of things here. And it's just, the advice is you have to monitor the terrains all the time. Always be thinking ahead. Which terrain haven't I hit? Which is more likely to hit? What's my percentage of it hitting? And which one is worse for me? Plan it out. You know, this thing I talked about, I think last episode, of this chess skill where you get the kind of, forward, what's the term here? It's kind of mapping or in vision in your mind's eye of sort of imagining the board and visualizing the board in one turn, doing that and sort of planning which of these are my 2 problems and mapping it to your cards. It's very, very challenging. Way more challenging, as I said before, than something like England. England is brute force, but England does not require this level of planning and intricacy and delicacy. England is just bam, build, 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 build. Do I have my big effect? Yes, I'm okay. Let's keep playing. Russia is like, I'm just going to do everything in like 10 lands, and you need to be like a scalpel. And if you're not, you're in trouble. So anyway, yeah, that's all of that. One little key trick here is with the pushing the explorers thing. Sometimes it'll be a good idea, often actually, it'll be a good idea to push your explorers into lands and make a triple stack of explorers in lands that are about to ravage anyway. So way back at the start of the episode, I talked about the example of 10 explorers in a sands, and sands is about to ravage. It doesn't do anything. For 1 turn at least, it makes no difference. Next turn it will. This turn it won't. Or, well, this ravage it won't. Technically, if you do that in the slow, it'll be next turn. But anyway, let's ignore all of that. But yeah, you're going to triple explorers in lands that are going to ravage next turn is often a good strategy, or a good tactic, let's say, more than strategy, against Russia, because it gives you a chance to it gives you a slight breather. It gives you some of those, I'm going to keep this land empty for the fear bomb. I'm going to keep this land at 1 instead of 2 for the stage 3 explorer, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to make a triple stack in a land that's about to ravage anyway next turn. And then maybe I'll deal with it in the slow. Or maybe I'll blight remove and I won't deal with it at all. And I'll go into this blight removal sort of cycle. So it gives you opportunities to do those type of things. So that can be a very nice way. But do bear in mind, of course, as we've said multiple times, the matching the multiple cards can be a killer. Pushing in and going triple stack in there, and then the fear bomb comes and you end up with the double ravage next turn, can just wipe you out. One other final thing about managing your island board and all of that here, it's a very minor thing, but just something to consider. Sometimes if you have a choice, keep your problem land central. And by problem land, I mean, you know, this land where you put 100 explorers in and you keep trying to blight remove it. Having that land central can be quite nice because it gives you slight better optionality when it comes to things like blight cascades, or when you're pushing your explorers out, where do you push them to, all this kind of stuff. If you're over in the corner, you can end up with really big scary blight cascade situations. And again, in my playthrough, I had some horror show blight cascades, and I was very lucky to kind of get out off the back of them. That is all of that. Now we're continuing on, and we're still very good here. Although we're now less all in terms of how much I have to say about the things, but we'll keep going. Blight removal. It is very, very good. It's excellent. Into Russia. We talked about it last time. I don't like blight removal in general in this game, but it is excellent against Russia. Why is it good? It turns off Russia 6. So you just take the blight and then you clean it up. Good news. You can infinite loop blight to skip a huge land, provided that you don't hit the double card, which again we've mentioned already. And just generally, Russia are going to blight a lot. I think I've said that in this episode so far. They blight loads, just loads. So blight removal is just good. It just keeps you alive. And it's, you know, it's more effective than something like Sweden, where Sweden blight a lot, but Sweden put like 2 blight at a time, so you can't clean the land. I hate blight removal against Sweden, even though they are sort of similar in terms of adding a lot of blight to the board, but they add 2 at a time, so you can't actually clean that land and clean it up for next time. So that's kind of the difference there. But do be careful; it's not all good news. Your blight removal will not protect your beasts. So this kind of, ravage and then clean it up later, that can lose your beast for your loss condition. And as I said, it can kind of lose to multiple matching ravage cards as well. Now, that's all our very goods. We've got a couple of goods here. Skips. Multiple people mentioned earlier on about skips. Skips can be very excellent against Russia. For the same reason that the blight removal trick kind of works well, skips can be very good too. Are you in a reclaim loop? Do you have a skip that can skip one huge land? Yeah, it's borderline broken against Russia. It's a very strong way to try beat them, especially if it's a multi-skip. Paralyzing Fright. Skip all actions in target land. It doesn't matter how many ravage cards it matches to, none of them will ravage. So really good if you could reclaim Paralyzing Fright. It works against Russia. I'm here to tell you, here's the hot take from Tepid Goose today, is looping Paralyzing Fright every turn is a good strategy in Spirit Island, including against Russia. So now that's out of the way. What are the issues with doing skips against Russia? Why is this not very good and instead it's good? First of all, Russia 6 wants you to blight. And if you're skipping everything, you're hitting Russia 6. So that's kind of something to bear in mind here. If you're not reclaim looping and you skip this turn, the problem's coming right back at you next turn. So very similar what we talked about with HME when I talked about the HME episode, and I said skips are actually probably at their weakest against HME. A similar-ish problem here against Russia. If I'm not reclaim looping that skip next turn and there's still 3 explorers in that land, they're just coming back for more next turn. So I do think skips are a bit better here than against HME, but you've got a similar problem. They can ravage multiple times in one turn. So again, if your skip is skip 1 ravage and you match the card twice, it's not stopping it. And then finally, the last reason that I don't have skips as very good against Russia is Russia have a huge amount of inevitability. I've been reinforcing this point the whole game, the whole episode here. They have huge inevitability, and if you thought the first fear bomb was bad, that second fear bomb, when it comes down and it drops a stage 3 double terrain card into that build slot and then ravages next turn, they're going to place approximately 1 trillion blight on your board. And if you've been faffing around skipping lands and not winning the game, you're going to find out all about the action economy of Russia next turn. So, there is an element of skipping. Yes, it's good to an end. If skipping is part of my engine, this is what we talked about before, the engine. If I've got an engine that includes a skip, great, happy days. If I'm skipping just to kind of buy time for something that might happen later on, Russia will bury you. That's good. Next, good, beasts. So multiple things going on with beasts here. So first, the escalation. So watch for the escalation forcing the triple explorer lands. And this is really important because especially with the fear bomb, they can land a stage 2 card on you out of nowhere. Always be aware, again, the pushing the explorers around all the board. Where am I pushing them? Which lands? Sometimes you're just going to have to take a chance. I'll push it in that land and hope that, it doesn't escalate or something like that. Because it can force the triple explorer on you very quickly. And especially if you're playing that strategy where you're like trying to remove explorers from one board, and then maybe push them all onto one board, they're just going to start hammering you with loads of explorers into the beast. So just be aware of that. If you do that, of course, this kind of strategy of you shut the escalation off on one or more boards, when you get to there, of course, you want to be skipping instead of blight removal for the obvious reason of that's going to start destroying the beast in there. So that's kind of one thing to be aware of. I think I said we talked about it earlier on about how sometimes events can remove beasts. Power cards can remove beasts. This can be great. It can turn off the Russia loss condition if you get it done early enough, like I did in one game, or you can lose the game if it happens at the wrong time. So do be wary of that. One thing I would say about beasts as well against Russia, and I think it's been said already, is that some spirits just completely ignore the loss condition if they have beasts in their kit. Many Minds, Sharp Fangs, Lure of the Deep Wilderness, Breath of Darkness, and Grinning Trickster, I think are the kind of 5 key beast users or beast adders, let's say, in the game. They just basically can't lose to the loss condition. It's not possible. Like, even adding one single beast from their kit is usually enough to just completely turn off the loss condition. But some of them add obviously a lot more than one. So that's something. But again, of course, there are cards in the minor deck, the major deck, that can kind of do that as well. It came up in my game where I found Infestation of Venomous Spiders, and one activation or one use of that card already turned off the loss condition from ever being a thing. And we talked, of course, as well about the Beast Infi triggers. So this kind of event thing where you kind of do what Noradrenaline said, where you sort of trigger one and you push it over and you push it and you push it. The thing that I hate against Russia, it's something to bear in mind here. If you're a beast user, sometimes those, Many Minds or Sharp Fangs will have this kind of thing where you go bam, 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 bam. You just generate like 20 fear or something like that. So no, having extra beasts on the board against Russia, clearly for multiple reasons here, is usually quite a strong thing. Now, we've got a couple of neutrals here before we close all of this out here. Defend is a neutral. It can often be bad. It's probably bad to neutral, I would say. Why is it bad? They just ravage for too much. Their ravage amounts are too high. The explorers deal extra damage. There's multiple explorers. The triple explorers are like 6 plus however many buildings. They ravage for a lot. So it can be very challenging to defend that. It's a little bit like Sweden in that regard. But there are some good news here. Defending obviously protects your beast sometimes if you need to just protect the beast and not let a blight in. The good damage conversion. Of course, if you can defend, your Dahan will fight back and maybe kill multiple explorers, which can be quite good because it's only one action and all that kind of stuff as well. So that can be quite good. But of course, the Russia 6 wants you to take Blight, which is why the likes of a Bird's Cry Warning here, that type of effect. Again, we've got one in the kit of Shifting Memory. I can't remember what it's called. Similar effect. Take the Blight, protect the Dahan, and then the Dahan fight back. Can be quite strong into Russia, actually, and we talked about that being strong into Habsburg Livestock as well. So here it's a kind of a similar situation too. So defend sometimes good. I wouldn't rely on it too much personally. Next up, something that we haven't heard so far. Maybe a little surprising. I'm putting it in neutral. Fear. We've obviously done the fear breakdown, but here is the kind of fear gain. Management of fear is key. Management of fear is very good, right? If we talk about management of fear, we're at the very good end of the spectrum. But from a fear gain perspective here, it's in neutral. Because as we've heard so many people say, you want to gain a small amount of fear or loads of fear and nothing in the middle. You don't really want to hedge here. You don't want to sort of go in the middle. You don't want to play a standard game. You want to rush it and get out and try beat them before they overwhelm you, or you want to take your time and scale your spirit and build your engine before you start hitting your fear bombs. So tracking your fear and managing your fear and knowing the bombs are coming is the whole thing here. It's absolutely key. And knowing your strategy around that is just the whole thing. I say the whole thing. That's not the whole thing. That's nowhere near the whole thing. There's so much more to beating Russia than that, but it is pretty important. Fear racing is excellent. I just mentioned here, they've got the fewer buildings. Again, we've already talked about this, I think, so you can reach the win conditions earlier because there are fewer buildings on the board, and it is hard to contain them. So getting there early is quite a nice way to do it. Now, very last thing here is major powers, and I put major powers in neutral. I did talk about going wide instead of tall here, and that's still important here. But there are plenty of excellent majors in the deck against Russia. I put one or two here that we don't see too much of too very often, but quite nice. Savage Transformation. It's a very, very stinky major. I'm not sure I've ever even cast this card, but it is good against Russia. Let's be honest here. So it can convert explorers into beasts and generate some fear for 2 energies. Not too bad. You even get to do that twice if you've got the threshold. Strangling Firevine, another stinker that I don't like very much at all, but it is very good into Russia. Destroys a bunch of explorers, places some wilds and things like that as well. So, and even deal some damage. So Strangling Firevine's a windmill slam against Russia. Sleep and Never Waken is a very strong card in general, and it's an absolute killer against Russia. It's multi-skip. It removes explorers. It can generate fear if you're on that kind of fear racing track. So it's really good. And Voice of Command, then it can kind of do Ravage skips because it stops explorers participating. It can pull explorers in from adjacent lands to stop multi-ravages happening. It can destroy some buildings if you're racing towards fear victory conditions. So it can do all sorts of quite nice things as well. So there are a bunch of majors in there. If you've got the kind of spirit to kind of make the kit work, that can all be really good news. Now, what are we? We're 3 minutes and 5. We're going long, folks. But we're getting there. Couple of notes on some spirits, and then we will definitely get to the playthrough and break all that down. We're not too far away now. I'll go quickly through this because we've heard a lot of this already. Some of the best spirits. I think every one of these were mentioned so far. Maybe not all. Starlight. You've got skip, you've got blight removal on top, you've got multiple innates that interact with explorers, you see bunches of cards, you can find all the impacts cards. Starlight is S tier into Russia for sure. Lure, for all the reasons we heard about already. Enticing Bringer. I will use every opportunity available to me on my platform to sing the praises of Enticing Bringer. Let me tell you something, and here is another chance for me to do the same. Enticing Bringer is fantastic into Habsburg Livestock Colony, which is a very difficult adversary, and it's fantastic into Russia. You can gather a bunch of explorers. You can stop infinite explorers ravaging for damage every single turn. You can deal loads of fear, and you can race through the fear deck. And Enticing Bringer is just the biggest amount of fun you can have in this game. Get Enticing Bringer to the table if Russia are causing you problems. It's a blast. Now, next, Keeper. We talked about it already. They've high action economy, one of the highest action economies in the game. Their ride and aid is amazing. They place wilds. They do all sorts of stuff. Really good. And then offensive. Then so that was your kind of defensive and control. From an offensive perspective, then you've got Stone's Unyielding Defiance. Stone is kind of a defender and an attacker in a sense. They get to counter Russia because they just take blight every turn, and they get to use the damage back at the invaders. Their plus damage works really well with the Ride and Aid, so they can just start wiping big lands out, no hassle later on in the game. One thing to point out about Stone is that they, because they take a lot of blight, the loss condition can actually be quite difficult for Stones. That's one thing to look out for there. Now, the worst spirits then against Russia. So from a kind of a defense/support sort of perspective, we've got 2 spirits who are similar here. Snake and Memory. Both very low action economy, especially earlier in the game. They both sort of focus on bigger, high impact type actions, especially as they transition to majors in the kind of mid game, especially there. Not great. Support as a general guideline in this game tends to do better at going big instead of wide. Support is it. I'm thinking extreme measures here now, but like support is good at like, I'm supporting you to threshold your briny deep, or I'm supporting you to threshold your big major, or your innate, or something like that. Very often it's like that big effect instead of I'm supporting you to play like 6 card plays type of thing. You know, it's a very broad strokes thing, and there are of course many ways in which support works to go wide. Boon of Vigor from River is one example of a support pair that works really well going wide instead of tall. So there are plenty of examples of that too. But generally speaking, Snake and Memory, they've got cards in their hand and they've got effects that support other spirits. That's dedicating an action to support someone else. That's not an action you're dedicating to your board. So you better believe you're going to be in trouble. Couple of notes here. Snake has Elemental Aegis, which I think is a good card into Russia. If you can find a way to maybe repeat that card or something like that, that could be okay. And I think from Memory's perspective here, Intensify is probably a better option if you're going to go for Memory. It's got more, again, it's got better action economy because you can use your things to kind of double up effects and maybe use that to solve like multiple lands or something like that. So it's probably slightly better that way. Now, Control, Mud. We talked about Mud already. It's not a control spirit, don't get me wrong, but Mud's control-ish effect where it sort of stops buildings and generates explorers. It builds explorers, which is obviously going to be disaster into Russia. So that's well known to be a pretty horror matchup. And then a few offensive spirits here before we close out. I thought Wildfire is quite interesting, bringing up again Red Revenge's kind of matchup axis. He's got base Wildfire as a D and transforming Wildfire as an A+. So here's a sort of a massive swing of like 4 full tiers almost of a spirit from one to another. Interesting to stop and reflect on for a moment here. So base Wildfire is it doesn't spread very wide. It's not great at action economy. It tends to be very good into like individual lands. I'll jump over there, I'll place a blight, I'll deal 3 damage, and then in the fast I'll deal another 4 damage. I'll wipe out like a big land. It doesn't get spread its stuff everywhere. It's like goes into a couple of lands. Later on, of course, it can split its innate and all that, but let's ignore that for now. It's not great at getting about the place. It's good at dealing with a couple of individual problems. And it's not good when the adversary is placing blight all over your board. So I think that base D matchup makes sense to me. Transforming, on the other hand, A+, interesting. So what does it do? First of all, it removes blight. So I think this idea of place the blight, remove the blight, place the blight, remove the blight, turn off Russia 6. Okay, that can maybe work. It places beasts with its transforming ability. I think that can also maybe work here, and I think that could be good as well. It removes explorers and place beasts, should I say. So the level 3 of the transforming innate, yeah, I believe that can work quite well here. However, and there is a big however, transforming will, every time you destroy a building, replace the building with explorers and push them out of that land. You're generating explorers with transforming Wildfire. So I find it a little tricky to understand how you go from a base D horror matchup to an A+ when the aspect you've just applied is generating explorers. So I might be wrong. Maybe some of the stuff I talked about that make transforming good are good enough that it doesn't matter that you're generating explorers, but I find that a little tricky to believe. Anyone wants to let me know why I'm wrong on that, please do hit me up in the comments, but I'm going to doubt the swing from D to A+ myself on that one a little bit. Now, last couple here, Lightning and Ocean. They're stereotypical building destroyers. Ocean as well, it doesn't have that much action economy, and it certainly can't get to its inland where some of those big problems might happen. So very clearly good or bad matchups for those make a huge ton of sense. Now, that is almost that's the breakdown, that's the analysis. We do have a playthrough to talk about here, and I will talk about it briefly here before we close out. Hopefully you've gone and watched it earlier on in the episode. It was a a little bit like this has been. It's been a long, wild ride, and that playthrough was something. 5.5 hours. It was amazing. It was a war. A couple of things. Of course, I always make mistakes, and in this case, I did a couple of pretty egregious ones. I forgot to add my bonus to hand with Heart Vigil, which is just so annoying. So in some cases, it's not a strict upgrade. This is not one of them things where it's like, oh, I forgot to add my to hand, so I made the game strictly harder for myself. As I talk about in the episode, having the right amount of Dahan in your lands with Heart Vigil is key. If you go above a certain amount of Dahan, and by the certain amount I mean 2, so if you go to 3 Dahan in your lands, it becomes very difficult for the right innate to start solving problems, because it can only push 2 Dahan, and then your presence can't move with it and stuff like that. So sometimes that bonus Dahan stuff for Heart Vigil can kind of get in the way. Actually, it can cause problems for you. In this particular case, it wouldn't have. In this particular case, it actually would have helped me. So just I'm not going to talk about why, because it's just getting way too much in the detail, but it's just an interesting note to point that in some games, the extra to hand can kind of block you a bit. In this particular case, it wouldn't have. And it would have just helped me. The other thing that I did, which is awful, is later on in the game, around about mid game, I flipped the blight card, and I flipped to invaders find the land to their liking, which is just as I talked about last time. I hate that bloody blight card. It's awful. It's the one that adds the extra fear. But I made a mistake. So when I flipped it over, I was in the middle. I was in the stage 2. So it's the kind of round down thing. But because I'm playing 2 players, I rounded down the 1.5 to 1. So I only added 1 twice. I essentially added 2 blight to the pool. But of course, I should do 1.5 twice, which is 3. I should have added 3 to the pool instead of 2. Big mistake. Yeah, I mean, look. It's one of them where I probably should have started with saying that I won the game. So I did win. So that is actually 8 out of 8. So let's celebrate that. And I suppose I should stop and have a little sip of beer. We're nearly at the end of the bottle, guys. We're almost there. Celebrate my win. I actually managed to beat all 8 adversaries. 8 out of 8, 100% victory condition, but 100% asterisk and cheating involved in basically every single episode, which is not ideal, but as I've come to find, it is highly difficult. I mean, so much harder than I ever appreciated to get a game on a table and play it and talk and comment over and commentate and talk about your strategies while you're playing. It's so hard. And a huge props to everybody, and a huge apologies to everyone I ever commented on with any of your playthroughs, and Greg from Solo Playthroughs, Mitch from White Box, Red Revenge, and a whole bunch of others that I've commented on your videos and talked and criticized some of your plays. It was always only in the name of good conversation, but I was probably overly critical talking to you about certain things because it's so hard. But anyway, where was I? Yeah, I made that mistake, and it was one of them where I won the game, but I won it on a razor's edge amount of fear at the end of the game. And in hindsight, looking back, I may well have lost this if I hadn't have cheated on the fear. Of course, it's always a case where, if a game looks like one thing or another, you change how you play. So at the end, I basically rushed to a stage 3 or a terror level 3 victory to get rid of the last city in one Ravage. Now, as you look at the board, I would have actually lost because some of the other Ravages would have blight cascaded, and I would have lost from the blight cascade. However, if I changed the plays and I wasn't rushing for the stage 3 victory that turn, I might have been able to protect myself. So anyway, again, long story short is hugely interesting, very much on the razor's edge, on the knife edge there. I just about got over the line from the amount of fear, and it was one of them where could have easily lost, and it certainly looked on multiple turns like I was going to lose. I got a bit lucky. I think I flipped 2 still healthy island cards, which kept me just alive long enough to be able to turn the corner and get the victory. So I won. I can't call it a loss because I won, but it's one of them where got an asterisk and all of that, but I'm happy enough to say, look, I got the 8 out of 8. I got the 100% victory, and that is something to be happy about. Any details here before we close this out? Yeah, look, the engine stuff I talked about before. I tried my best. I got the engine with the Hearth Vigil. I got the kind of reclaim loop. Hearth Vigil, super boring. I went bottom track. I optimized for the left and 8. I got the left and 8 off basically every turn after like turn 2 or something like that. I used the special rules to clear some of the other lands as well. So I just did very much Hearth Vigil things. Hearth Vigil just kind of exists and it just wins, and I just don't like that. I just dislike the design of this spirit, and there are very few spirits in this game that I dislike the design of. And I think Hearth Vigil missed the mark pretty substantially. I think its development is way off. I think its development is even worse than its design. Again, that's not the case with many pieces of content in this game. This content is full of extremely good design and extremely good development. Spirit Island, Hearth Vigil missed on both somehow. Its development is I find miles off. I think it's way overpowered, but its design is wrong as well. I'm like, you look at it and you just go like, those rules just don't make sense to put together. Like, even if the tweaking is different, like, why do you put them together? That's too much. It's clearly too much. So I was like, you just exist and you win. It's just so stupid. But anyway, anything else interesting about Hearth Vigil? I found Gift of Living Energy. A Gift of Living Energy I talked about earlier in the game about being a key card. If I find it would be amazing. I found it and it was amazing. So I passed the energy over to Keeper, who was having problems, which I'll get to in a moment, and favors a story a season as well. Like, what the hell is that? What the hell is favors a story in season? What kind of a unique power is that? It's Gift of Constancy on a unique. Just oh god, this spirit is just okay. It's Gift of Constancy on a unique, and it was really good in the game. Moving on. Keeper of the Forbidden Wilds. Much more good. I've great things to say about Spreading Hostility. I've played it. This is my second time playing Spreading Hostility. I played it once before, had a blast. I do not like base Keeper very much at all. I've talked about this before on the podcast. It's excellent. It's a stats monster. It's just really good. You place lots of things. You've got like a really good growth patterns. You've got really good growth tracks. Your action economy is excellent. It's just too good. Its uniques are pants. They're awful. But it doesn't even matter. You've got terrible uniques and it doesn't even matter. So I just find the spirit boring. But Spreading Hostility is a great shot in the arm for Keeper. It was just a brilliant aspect. It took a boring spirit that was way too good and it nerfed it in an interesting way. And I played this game, and Keeper obviously is S tier into Russia, but Spreading Hostility very much isn't. And Hostility is like this puzzle where it's like, obviously I don't have that stupid double presence placement, paradigm that the base spirit has, and I've got to make decisions on, do I actually go top track here? Do I actually go bottom? I'd love to go bottom because I want to build that engine I talked about, but I don't have enough energy to do that. So, I've got these kind of unique powers in my head. What are the unique powers? Keeper is so terrible. Sacrosanct Wilderness is stone unplayable. It's awful. Towering Wrath is good elements, and it's just awful. It's like the worst major in the deck. It's a major power that's borderline unplayable as well. It's like Regrow from Roots I generally hate as a card. It's actually very good into Russia, so to be fair, that was significantly better than normal. In this matchup, Boon of Growing Power is a very good card. Clearly, Keeper has one very good unique power, but it's a card that you generally give away to other people, and your other 3 uniques are generally awful. But again, I like awful, you know? I like an interesting puzzle. I don't want it handed to me on the plate the same way Basekeeper does. So I had this weird, like, there was lots of kind of, G4 is potentially very good here into Russia because it deals 1 damage or maybe even 2 if I create the Badlands. But you've got this idea of it's a short-term gain, and I'm not building a long-term engine by doing that. So every turn I was like, oh, I feel like I need to use G4 here, but it's not gaining me a card. It's not building my long-term goal, but I feel like I need it. So I had this kind of, I used G4 a bunch, and every time I felt so awful about it. So I was in this really interesting space where I had lots of decisions to make. Instead of Hearts Vigil, it was just like reclaim, get my cards back, play them. Reclaim, get my cards back, play them. Keeper, it's like, oh no, do I reclaim now, or when? Like, who do I give Boon of Growing Power to? Do I take it? Do I give it to Heart Vigil? All these kind of really interesting decisions. Very hard to build a strong loop. Regular base Keeper can reclaim loop extremely well. Hostility can't. But it still had the right innate, which was very, very, very good. Excellent against Russia. And I still was able to shift to majors later on, which I had to because I ran into a lot of trouble. And I could find kind of a couple of majors in there that worked pretty well. So very interesting game. I very much enjoyed it. It was a hugely satisfying end to the end of the Adversary Series as well as Season 1. Again, if you were along for the ride, if you watched all of that, massive thank you to everyone. If you didn't and you stuck here and you sort of listened through to my musings around my playthroughs and all of that, I also appreciate that from you as well. Because as I said before, I wanted to make this section an interesting sort of way to reflect on what I saw in a game. Not necessarily because you had to see it, but because, there's some interesting things to understand about Russia and the spirit and sort of some of the things about all of that. So, hopefully that was, as I say, a little bit useful for you all there. That is almost it. I'm going to finish the beer because I committed to try finish the beer, and I'm going to do it. That's the last bit there. That is all 750 mils, and all 12.5% of all of that. How did I do? Can you hear it in my voice? Hopefully I managed all right. Next up. Usually this is the point when I talk about the next playthrough, and we talk about the kind of, the easy, hard, and wild card and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to do that this time around because there is no next episode for now. Next up is a break. I need a break. It's been a journey. Last, probably around December, somewhere in December. I think it might have been like early December, something like that. I made a decision. I think I talked about this all the way back in episode 0, so I'm not going to bore you here with the details, but I made a decision that I wanted to do something for me. And just, something interesting and engaging and fun and different from the grind. And I'm sure many people will hear that and go, yeah, the grind. Life is hard. And look, I'm not going to do this holier than thou stuff about I have kids and I have children, all that kind of stuff. Life is just hard for everyone. You all know it. If you're listening to this, I know you know it. I'm not about to hear to preach you about why life is hard. It just is, from every angle at all times. It just is. And I wanted to give myself something that was just a bit different. And I'm so glad I did it. I've really, really enjoyed this. But it's also been hard. It has not been easy. And I, again, at the beginning talked about wanting to make sure that this did not become too overbearing. And, all of these things about, I wanted to, the one take stuff about, I didn't want to get too deep in editing. And then I didn't want to get, at a certain point in my playthroughs, I started to get overwhelmed about, I was putting too many card, overlays and things. So then I introduced this card cam. So there's kind of been some stuff as I've gone along where I've kind of learned some lessons and I've tried my best to reduce the effort. But at the same time, there's been like, I talked, of course, about all the audio issues with the kind of, stuff like that. And hopefully I finally got to the end of the last episode without that. We'll see. But there's just been a whole bunch of stuff, and it's just become a lot more than I was planning. These episodes, what are we now? 3.5 hours in. Podcast episodes going 2.5, 3.5 hours. Maybe that's just me talking too much shite, right? Excuse my language, right? But that's how we'd say it in Ireland. Too much old shite talking, right? Maybe that's the case, but this is kind of just me. And this is the problem. And this is what I knew would be the problem all the way back at the beginning. I kind of don't have it in me to just half-ass something, And like when I did an Adversary Series, like it would have been so easy for me to just go, don't bother with the community integration. Don't bother with all those extra, the fear, thing that I did in this episode, or the major power deep dive with England, or, the event analysis with France, or whatever it was. It would have been easy for me to skip over all of that and do, maybe 1 hour episodes or whatever, which is what I was originally intending, by the way. I could have done that, but it was like, as I went along, I just kind of felt like this was it's just more me, it's more me to do the prep and do the insights and do the details and all of that. And it just kind of became the thing that I was doing. And, unfortunately, in one regard, it kind of hampered me, and it became too much, in all honesty. It became a lot of effort. And it became quite difficult, and some other things in my life have had to take a bit of a backseat as a result. And again, I'm not here to kind of bore you with all those details, but I kind of need to focus on some of that stuff again right now, which is why I've chosen to kind of come to the end of season 1 right now. So I need the break, and I need to sort of rededicate myself in a few other places right now. And in truth, I don't know what that looks like. And I don't know what timelines and other such things look like. And I'm not here to waffle, and I'm not here to promise certain things, because I don't think that's really very genuine. So it's just one of them situations where I've come to the end of a road, a very highly enjoyable road. I've really, really enjoyed this. I've wanted to do something like this for quite a while now. Years. I've sort of had this thing in my mind where I could do that. You know what I mean? Not necessarily around Spirit Island or anything, but like, again, I've talked in the past about my career and me and my personality and all those kind of things. Like, I like to do this kind of stuff. I've done some like online education and some other such things like that in the past, where this is kind of me. I like to do this, And I sort of thought, oh God, YouTube channel, I could do that. Come on, I could have a YouTube channel. Watching streamers, I like obviously watching streamers, Magic the Gathering streamers, Luis Scott Vargas, if anybody knows, I like watching him still to this day. So I look at streamers and I look at other people and go, oh God, that looks like fun. I could do that. Come on. Now, you'll have to be the judge of whether I can do that or not. But it's one of them things where it was something I always wanted to do, and I'm so glad I did it. And this all is sounding very final, and all of that, and it's not, in truth. But at the same time, I also can't promise what's next. I want to take this forward, and I want to do much more of this. But at the same time, I also have to be realistic on what I can do and what are the other things in my life that I need to do. So I am just simply stating that at this time, this moment in time, I've had a lot on my plate. I'm hugely thankful of everything I've done and all the support I've gotten and where I've gotten to. And it is just one of them things where I'm going to have to just let things lie for a while and see where I go from here. I have a whole backlog of content that I plan, that I have planned, should I say, things that I'd love to do next. I really enjoy the playthroughs because I love playing this game. I love doing these episodes, the analytics and on breaking things down and sort of doing the kind of, let's call it, teaching elements to it. I've loved all of this, but it's heavy. You know, these kind of episodes and doing all the breakdown and gathering all the inputs and all of that, it's heavy. It's hard work. The editing is hard work. So, you know, I need to find a way, you know, I'm going to use the word if, but I'll use if when. If when I take this forward into the future, I need to find a way that I can do this, you know, that fits my schedule. And as I say, up until now, the schedule's been it's been difficult. So I have to manage all of that, and I have to manage. I'm a project manager. Managing expectations is my job, and I want to manage everyone's expectations in a very fair way, and that includes mine and my family's as well as yours. So that is kind of what all of that is. I have to find a way that works for everybody. Probably, in truth, reducing the amount of time that I spend in future, or at least finding a way to balance my time in better ways. Now, does that look like only playing true solo in my playthrough so that I can shorten the time? Does that look like, you know, less of these kind of deep dive, kind of informative teaching type episodes? Does it mean less production values, which I would not be in love with because I'm very perfectionist when it comes to those kind of things? So there's lots of options, right? And kind of, I just need to sort of figure all those out. So look, what I would invite you to do at this point in time before I close out the episode is, if you have any inputs on any of that, on what you've liked, maybe what you haven't liked. If you've ever heard of this thing, stop, start, continue. It's a kind of a very basic, famous, stupid, boring, businessy kind of model of retrospective and reflection at the end of something. What should we stop doing? What didn't work? What should we start doing? What did we miss? Or what should we continue doing? What was good? If there's any of them, you know, any comments or any sort of, you know, things or inputs that you'd have, I would be more than happy to hear. And if that's just stop doing 3.5 hour episodes, for God's sake, give us 1 hour. We don't want to hear you waffle for 3.5 hours. Let me know. Every piece of feedback is hugely valuable and informative for me, and whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. So look, that is genuinely going to be it. That is going to be the outro for the end of season 1. I can't promise when I'll be back here. I really do sincerely hope it won't be too long. And you know, that is genuinely going to be it. But look, for the final time, until next season, may your manifestations, all of you, be always powerful and glorious. See you then.